Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very excited to welcome Cody Dericks back to the podcast today to talk about Frenzy and the career of my all-time favorite director, Alfred Hitchcock. How are we doing, Cody?
We're doing well. I'm still a little confused as to why this is called Frenzy. Maybe we can talk about that.
Well, do you see the title of the book it's based on? It's a long title. It's like two different city names in it. Goodbye, hello. I mean, I watched the behind the scenes documentary about this movie last night, and the screenwriter was talking about the book it was based on. I felt like it took him 30 seconds just to say the title. So
yeah, not gonna fit on the marquee. So in that sense, I get it, but it is kind of just a word.
Yeah, well, I felt like it's kind of like Psycho. It sounds kind of like Psycho, and Psycho is 6 letters, and Frenzy is 6 letters.
Psycho is about a psycho, though. So
I could see Hitch being like, "Give me a 6-letter, one-word title."
Yeah,
that sounds thrilling. And they were like, Frenzy, and he's like, good.
Could have been The Birds is close, but too many words.
The Birds. Marnie is 6 letters.
Marnie. You could have done Birds.
So
that's
he should have just called it like Psychos.
That's 7 letters. Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking Frenzy today. It's very exciting for me because I started this podcast almost 2 years ago now, and I knew back then, I was like, oh, we get to a pretty significant Hitchcock movie in 2022, and we are finally here. I've talked about Hitchcock a little bit. Last year, we did a bonus episode about Strangers on a Train, which turned 70 last year, which is one of my favorite Hitchcocks. As we'll talk about at the end, we get to pick our favorites. But today we're talking about his one and only R-rated horror film, kind of thriller horror film, Frenzy. Had you seen this one before?
I had not. I have never seen anything he's made post The Birds, which is 63, I believe. And he made like 4 or 5 movies after that before.
You haven't missed very much.
And that's what I've heard. I've heard it kind of once Psycho hits, it's kind of march.
It's like
downhill from there.
It's like when he has a falling out with Bernard Herrmann, his amazing composer who he worked with for over a decade. They had a falling out on Torn Curtain. Bernard Herrmann scored that movie and he rejected it. Hitchcock rejected the score and he got someone else. And it's almost like when he let Herrmann go, the quality of his films dipped big time. And after The Birds, right away, we get Marnie, which is not a great movie, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I kind of look at it as his like last kind of really interesting story, if it's not a great movie. And then Torn Curtain and Topaz for me are really rough. I think the hardest movie of his to get through is Topaz from 1969.
I've heard that, and also I've heard the one after this, Family Plot, is not amazing.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it, so maybe it's
I mean, we talk about this all the time with actors and directors, like trying to have one last like great film to go out on, and I feel like, not to say that Frenzy is a great movie, but it's kind of a return to form to what he was doing in the 40s and 50s and things.
Right.
And I feel like Frenzy would have been the right one to go out on. Family Plot is very kind of stale and safe and feels very old fashioned. Frenzy, he's being a little bit more experimental and trying new things, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's always interesting in a kind of sad way when directors, their last movie is kind of accidentally not that impressive. Jonathan Demme is a very similar case where his last movie is Ricky and the Flash. And then
was that his last movie? Because he would make documentaries too, right?
Yeah, that's his last theatrical feature film. I think he did like a Justin Timberlake concert movie after that, which is actually not bad. But the Ricky and the Flash is just so nothing, and then that's it. Well, it's kind of a bummer.
It was fine. I feel like your last movie stars Meryl Streep, could be worse, right?
Could be worse. Yeah. Could be Family Plot, which I haven't seen again, but
Family Plot, I guess we'll get to in 2026 because that movie,
we're still here.
We're still here. That movie is that took him a while. It's interesting. Up until Marnie, he's like almost a movie a year. The Birds took longer. The Birds took a while because of the visual effects. I mean, trying to create like CGI birds in 1961, 62, that was kind of tricky like to figure that out. So I would say, I mean, if you look at his work of the 50s, especially, it is so prolific. He has many years in the 50s where he has 2 movies in the same year, and they're all great. And it's just like, I would say the 1950s might be my least favorite like decade of cinema. Like there's obviously great stuff. There's great stuff every year.
It's the worst. It's bad for Western cinema and also the Oscars. It's a really rough run.
The decade of Around the World in 80 Days and Greatest Show on Earth. Of course, there are great films each year, and Douglas Sirk and some of these directors doing good work, and a lot of great foreign films in the 50s. But there is a little bit of a safe quality to like. They couldn't really do a whole lot yet. It's not until the 60s where they start playing with more adult themes and trying, different, like in the 50s, there's just so much safety. And it's like,
I think it's a very post-war Eisenhower kind of methodology to the movies. Also, you're trying to fight with TVs. They had to figure that out.
Yeah. But oddly enough, that's the decade where Hitchcock is firing on all cylinders, is making just amazing work. We're going to talk about his run with the Oscars. He was nominated 5 times and only once in the 50s for Rear Window. And it's kind of amazing to me that he only got 1 nomination for director in the entirety of the 1950s, because I would say he's got at least 3 or 4 that decade he should have been nominated for. But that'll be a discussion for later on after we talk about Frenzy a bit. Before we get to the movie, I would like to just know kind of your history with Hitchcock, Cody. Like, what was the first one you saw? Or kind of what was like your introduction to Hitchcock, and like what do you think of his career as a whole?
Yeah, so I was raised on TCM, like a lot of us were, I'm sure. And my mom is a big Hitchcock fan. So I grew up watching quite a bit of Hitchcock fairly young. I got Vertigo, North by Northwest, Man Who Knew Too Much, Psycho, all movies I'd seen before I like got to middle school.
Like before middle school. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I was really cool. I had really, I was very pretentious.
You were telling your like 5th grade friends, like, oh my gosh. I just watched not the remake of The Man Who Knew Too Much. I watched the original 1934 version.
I meant the remake. I haven't seen the original. I'm sorry.
That's where you can really impress your 5th grade friends when you tell them he made impressed. 2 of the same story.
Did you know? But that Strangers on a Train in particular, I was really into. There was a time when I was about 7 where I said that was my favorite movie, like most 7-year-olds.
At 7 years old, you would tell people Strangers on a Train was your favorite movie?
Yeah. So if you think I am not the person I am all the time, I always have been. So
was it the homoerotic undertones you liked about that one at 7?
Perhaps. Maybe. Maybe I didn't know that yet.
The guy living with his mom and
One
like
day
stalking.
I want to be a stranger on the train myself.
Yeah, accidentally hit the other guy's shoe and get to talking about swapping murders. No one will catch us.
Right? Is it? Never mind.
But that's something that I did a presentation about homoeroticism in Hitchcock's work in 2015 at the Thornton Wilder conference in Rhode Island, where he talked about the homoerotica in Shadow of a Doubt with the villain, Uncle Charlie, where he talks about how he hates women and blah, blah, blah. And there's all sorts of interesting, I feel like that's one of his films that you don't hear a whole lot about the homoerotica, because it's not like he's interacting with a lot of other men, but he talks about his hatred of women a lot.
If anything, you hear a lot more about like the kind of like weird vibes between uncle and niece in that movie.
Yeah.
That is definitely more on the surface, I'd say, and probably was picked up by actual audiences at the time. I haven't seen that movie in a while, but I remember picking that up when I saw it.
Yeah, but the other 4, I guess, films I talked about Rebecca and Mrs. Danvers and her obsession with Rebecca. And clearly there's something going on there. And North by Northwest, Martin Landau's supporting character, clearly in awe of James Mason. And there's always like a little something going on there. And then, of course, Rope. Right, which we haven't mentioned.
Rope is
the biggest one, right?
Rope is not even. It's not even subtext. I mean, like it technically is because they don't talk about it, but those are boyfriends.
Yeah, and then Strangers on a Train, and both are Farley Granger films, and Farley Granger was gay, so it's just an interesting.
Yeah, Rope feels like the only one where it was a mutual thing, rather than in the other movies. It usually is kind of a villainous undercurrent, right? The villain is obsessed with the hero of the same gender.
It's usually the villain. So I guess you're right. I mean, and in Rope, I mean, they kill a guy in the first shot, so I guess it's always the villain, right?
I mean,
I don't think Farley Granger
not heroes. I don't know if anybody's ever told you that before, but usually that's how stories work.
Yeah. But now we get to Frenzy. Did you catch any homoerotica in Frenzy?
I did not. Obviously, there's a lot of erotica sans homo.
Sans homo.
It's a very it feels like this is the first Hitchcock movie I've seen post like
The Birds.
Yes. So it's the first I've seen that is not in the era of Hays Code of censorship. Yeah. And I know it's different in England, but still. Mm-hmm. So it's the first time I've seen a movie where he's allowed to do whatever he wants. And it really shows that this is the kind of things that were themes and subtext in his other movies, you know, tying sexuality and violence, a lot of fascination with voyeurism, especially in regards to women.
Yeah.
He's really into strangling. That's all in the forefront in this and very apparent in its intentions and psychological impact, rather than being kind of just subtext, something to support the themes rather than being the themes themselves.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Frenzy is that you get the sense like if he could have done anything he wanted for his entire career, we would have seen a lot more. If Psycho had come out in 1972, I wonder what that would look like. I wonder what the whole movie would look like.
Pushes it for 1960. That is she's in her underwear a lot of the time. She dies in the shower. Mm-hmm. Famously, it's the first movie to show a toilet flushing. So there's
isn't that crazy? That's the first movie, or at least American movie, to show a toilet flushing. And it's a movie where a woman gets brutally attacked and murdered in a shower while naked.
Yeah. It pushes it. It really pushes it in that movie.
Yeah.
So you can tell he was wanting to put these kinds of things in his movies. And he just was not permitted.
Yeah. So Psycho was my introduction to Hitchcock. I would say I was in 5th grade. Mm-hmm. I had this CD-ROM in the mid 90s called Cinemania, and some select films would have like clips and audio clips and different things. And there was an audio clip of Psycho. It's that scene where he says, "My mother is not quite herself today." And it was so intriguing to me. And pretty much every Hitchcock film on Cinemania, it would say thriller. And Psycho, it said horror. It was like the only one. Uh-huh. And I was like, so that must mean it's scary. And the other ones are more just like adventures or something. So I remember I said, "Mom, can I rent Psycho?" She said, No. And I was like, "Mom, I've seen Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. Dad showed me The Evil Dead a few months ago.
Okay.
I can't rent this old black and white horror film." She was like, "Okay." Like it didn't take long for me to convince her.
Well, the thing about Psycho, I think that does make it explicitly a horror movie compared to his other ones. I'd say The Birds is probably also horror.
Yeah, that might have been the other one that said horror, was The Birds.
The thing about Psycho is because it's in black and white, it's from 1960, filmed probably in the late 50s. You don't expect this level of horror and violence and sexuality. And so it makes it more shocking in a way than if you watched, to your point, Nightmare on Elm Street, where you're expecting blood shooting everywhere.
Yeah.
You're not really expecting that when you watch a movie from the 60s in black and white.
Yeah. And it was, I remember a shift for me. I'm like, okay, this is like a quiet, talky film for a while. It's not The Evil Dead. Like, this is something totally different. But I remember being taken with it even at age 11. And then I went to it was either a birthday party or a Halloween party. We watched The Birds. And I remember everyone was kind of bored. And I was super into The Birds. I was like, this is great. This is really cool.
Also showed The Birds to my friends in middle school at a sleepover.
I feel like The Birds is the one you can, like 11, 12-year-olds can handle.
Especially boys. I feel like they like that kind of stuff. I remember that was back when you called to see if your friends could come over. You called their parents. Yeah. And we called to see if one of my friends was allowed to watch The Birds. And the mom said no. We were like, we're watching it anyway. I don't care what your mom says.
That's amazing. Yeah. The kids who that sad kid, he's like, "My mom won't let me watch it."
Yeah.
It's like you've probably seen and heard far worse in your life. You can handle The Birds. Like, come on.
Yeah, we have the internet already.
But those are two of my favorite Hitchcock stories. I love stories, especially the ones that he does, where it starts as something and then it becomes something completely different. Like Psycho starts. Yeah, like these films he would make where you think you're watching this kind of story and then it just completely upends that and then you're watching something else. And that's very much the case in Psycho, of course, but then also The Birds, because it's almost like that movie could have been a love story. Like it could have just been like this quiet, dramatic love story. And because it's Hitchcock, you know, it's going to be something different.
Yeah. Vertigo too feels like, whenever I watch Vertigo, which I love, obviously, it feels like the longest movie in the world because there's two distinct halves and they are both like 3-act structures. So there's almost 2 movies in there and it just makes it feel so long, which I'm not complaining about, but there's a lot of movie in there.
Yeah. I've taught a couple English classes where we use Hitchcock films and clips of his work to kind of like inform their papers and the topics they're writing. And the films that they love the most the students love the most are Vertigo and Psycho. And I think I showed Rear Window almost every time.
Yeah.
The one that college students do not respond to, I have found, I've shown it twice, is The Birds. Like they don't like it.
I mean, I don't
know if it's the age or what.
Decades, but I think it is a little bit.
It's like silly. It's a little clunky. It's very slow for about 30-40 minutes. And the bird attack scenes don't hold up in 2022 the way that a lot of his other work does.
No,
because there's like here and there in his other great films there'll be like a moment that looks a little cheesy now, but The Birds is tricky because you have like the attack scenes have a lot of moments where it's a little creaky and you just have to go with it. But I think 18-19-year-olds are like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a B movie, which feels weird to say about an Alfred Hitchcock movie. You know, he's one of the most respected directors, period, but it definitely is something more akin to like The Fly rather than, it's not high art.
Yeah. So the 1950s is his strongest decade, some of his best work. And then he has Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which is this huge hit on television. I think it went on for 7 seasons and Hitchcock directed some of the episodes. And I've watched a lot of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. It's a lot of fun. His intros and outros are spectacular. They're just fantastic. And then like that crazy 3-year Vertigo, which flopped in 58 and is now considered one of the great movies of all time. And then North by Northwest, which was a huge hit, blockbuster. Everyone loved North by Northwest. One of his great, probably his best, just pure entertainment movies. Like it's just so much fun. And then Psycho in 1960. Like you can't get 3 more different movies than those
in
3.
3 years.
And he makes them back to back in 3 years. Like
it's wild.
And so I mean, from 1951, Strangers on a Train to Psycho 1960, it's just spectacular. And then The Birds did very well 3 years later. And then after The Birds is when it dips. That's when we start to see the decline. He's getting older. He's getting into his 60s. And, you know, Hitchcock was not necessarily a man who took care of himself physically. So, you know,
sure.
And have you read any biographies about him? Like I've read a lot of books, and it's like, you know, his typical lunch would be just, I mean, enough for 5 people at dinner, and he would have it for lunch.
Very
like,
Orson Welles.
He'd have like a bottle of wine with lunch. It's like, and like he was a man who lived it up and enjoyed himself.
Yeah, he'd have a huge lunch. He'd harass the secretary. You know, just
yeah. And so things. Also we should mention, you know, the time of The Birds and Marnie is when we have this really controversial moment of his life where he became obsessed, or at the least very interested in Tippi Hedren, and, you know, said some things to her, potentially, you know, acted on her in a way that, I mean, we'll never know 100% what happened. We've heard what Tippi Hedren has said about it. And there's been some film, at least one film I watched about it. And it's horrendous and it's inexcusable. And it's a moment of his life that I feel really, really sad about. And I'm really sad for Tippi Hedren and what happened there. But I think, you know, I mentioned Bernard Herrmann at the beginning. I think this incident is also a reason for his downfall after The Birds, because it's almost like a little bit of the light in his eyes is gone, and the originality he was giving us for so many years kind of goes away after Marnie.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a man knowing he's at the end of his career in many ways. I don't want to say that he put less effort into his movies because of that, but I mean, the success rate was much lower, obviously.
Yeah.
Which happens a lot. You know, a lot of directors, as they get older, their last like 10 movies are kind of, so. Yeah.
Very few directors like towards the end are giving us their best work.
Right. Not everybody can be Scorsese. So
you have the occasional like Scorsese, you have some of these guys who are, you know, hitting 80 or over 80 and they're still giving us just amazing films, and that's fantastic. But yeah, after Marnie, we get Torn Curtain with Julie Andrews and Paul Newman, which has one great scene where they're trying to kill this guy and they can't, and they're like using every instrument in the house that they can, and they can't kill him, and it goes on for 5-6 minutes and it's great. Everything around that is just like dull as dishwater, just not very interesting. And then I would say, if I had to pick my least favorite of all of his movies, it's Topaz from 1969. I was vacationing with my family up at Lake Tahoe one summer, and I was like, I kind of want to rent a Hitchcock movie. And this old man hands me a VHS of Topaz and says, if you like Hitchcock, you'll love Topaz or something. And I went, Topaz? I don't even know this one. I looked on the back, it said Hitchcock, 1960s. I'm like, oh, awesome. I still have a memory to this day. I think even my younger brothers, like we all sat down in front of the little TV we had at our Tahoe cabin. And I put on Topaz and I think we made it 10 minutes and we were like, no.
I haven't seen that one, but that's you. Every now and then you hear defenders of underseen gems or movies that are seen as lesser efforts. That one, you don't really get a lot of.
Yeah, so on the Universal collection of DVDs and Blu-rays, there are amazing behind-the-scenes documentaries about all of his movies that he made for Universal. Frenzy, the documentary I watched last night, was almost an hour long and had all the cast. Okay. It was amazing. The documentary for Topaz, if I remember correctly, is just like 20 minutes of Leonard Maltin talking about why it's underappreciated Hitchcock.
Okay, Leonard. Okay, Lenny. Well, I'm just looking now. Topaz is 2.5 hours long.
And it's like his longest movie.
Wild.
It goes on and on and on, and it's just dialogue. And I think there's one really great shot of a woman dying, and she like falls down on the ground, and her red dress kind of looks like blood is covering the hardwood underneath her. There are a couple shots in the movie that are cool, but it's not a thriller like his other movies. It's very slow and talky.
Even the thing about Hitchcock is that even in his mediocre efforts, there's going to be one sequence or shot that stands out because he is a genius. You know,
2.5 hour movie. I would hope that he has something.
Yeah, please.
But it's just to think that he opened the decade with Psycho and ends it with Topaz. Only 5 letters in Topaz, so doesn't work. It's just like, it's clearly a director who's lost his way. Like, it's just not in his wheelhouse, and he's not doing the kind of great work he was before. And I think the reason why so many people at least really like, if not love, Frenzy is that it is a return to form. It's not at the same level as his great works, but it's just clearly he's being inventive. He's dealing with the R rating in a way that he never did before and wouldn't after. His last film, Family Plot, I believe is PG, and it's a pretty, safe movie. There's not like any thrills at all in Family Plot.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like, but it's just so fascinating to me because is there any other director, I meant to look this up, like, is there any other film director who was making films in the silent era in the 20s, as Hitchcock was, who worked long enough to make an R-rated movie after 68?
Right, because even like, I don't think David Lean started that early, but he never really delved into hardcore R rating, stuff like that.
Like John Ford was making films as early as the 1910s, and I know his career because I studied his work a few years ago, as one does. Just every year I pick a director and an actor to just look at most, if not all, of their films. And I believe his last film was 1966. Okay. And so he just barely missed. We talked about Rio Lobo by Howard Hawks. I don't think he was making any silent films, but I know like he made the original Scarface in 32 and, played around in every genre known to man and did all sorts of cool stuff. And his last movie was made in 1970, and it's this really safe PG or maybe even G Western. And it's like 1970 Howard Hawks. Like you could have like gone out on a really big bloody Western rated R. That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Instead he went safe.
I'm looking at King Vidor now, and his last movie was 1959. He lived into the 80s. So.
I mean, maybe there's one or two others that I maybe not as well known as Hitchcock. Maybe that I just can't think of. But if there are any others, that is a rarity. And for him to be, you think of the movie The Lodger from 1927. That's a silent film about a man wrongfully convicted of a crime, and he's running for his life, and he knows he's innocent, but they think he did it. And then you have a similar kind of plot in Frenzy. And here's a movie almost 50 years later in color, rated R, with nudity and graphic violence. And it's made by the same guy. I mean, that's just really interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, it really does. Frenzy really is an R-rated movie, and it would be today for a lot of reasons.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the attack, the first big attack scene, is rough. One that even today would get. I almost wonder if today that the movie would struggle getting an R rating with that kind of graphic violence. I don't know. Well,
that's the thing about the ratings, is that if there's like a perversity or like a glee to it, which there kind of is with these killings, because the killer is right there, reveling in what he's doing, that makes it even more horrifying, which is a smart move on Hitchcock's, because it, it's easy to put a killer in a movie and have them be remorseful or whatever, but this guy is not that at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't even have to read this. I mean, the basic premise is we're in London. We haven't mentioned that yet. So Hitchcock, he grew up in London and in the England area, and made his first few films there. And then after The Lady Vanishes, I want to say in 1938, he got an offer from David O. Selznick to come to America to make films in Hollywood. His first film being Rebecca in 1940. And I think Hitchcock recognized his career could only go so far if he stayed in England. Mm-hmm. And so he said yes. And he took his family, he had a wife and child, and they went to Los Angeles. And that's where he worked for most of his career after that, at Universal mostly, but also in some other studios. And I think he went back a couple times to make films overseas. I believe I read it was Under Capricorn and Stage Fright, films he made around 1950. Mm-hmm. But then he went back one more time, and Frenzy is in England, which is really cool because that's where he got his start. Another reason why I think a good one to go out on would have been Frenzy. Like, would have been a cool bookend, like a thriller set in England again, shot in England, which would have been really cool too. But there's a flavor to the setting of this movie that you don't see in his later works in any other movie.
I was going to say it's supremely British, and it's very 1970s. Everything is like brown, and they're drinking in the pub at 1 p.m. And it's very, not to stereotype, but it really does feel like a certain British flavor. And I mean, it's being made by a British guy, so you have to assume he knows what he's showing.
Everyone's always dressed up, and
and the food looks awful. And
which we gotta talk about. A Hitchcock trademark is food, right? There's usually a scene or more of food in a movie, and he really goes for it in Frenzy. With this inspector guy, and his wife is like this gourmet chef, making him just the most unappetizing foods.
That was the longest scene in the world, and it's supposed to be kind of the climax, because in a way he's outlining what they're going to do and who he thinks did it and blah blah blah, and it's just unending unappetizing food. So
we'll get to our main thoughts, but let's just go over briefly here the plot summary and some kind of early trivia here. So a serial murderer strangling women with a necktie. The London police have a suspect, but he is the wrong man. So some of his movies, you don't know who the bad guy is right away.
Right. Yeah.
This one you do. It's not like, I mean, at the 30-minute mark, at the first rape / strangulation murder scene, we find out who the killer is. It's not a movie. It's not a whodunit where you're trying to guess, is it him or is it him? Or maybe it's her. It's not a mystery at all.
There's no mystery element to it. It doesn't want you to be guessing. It's about how will this guy who's being accused of being the killer get away from that accusation.
Yeah. And so we get an ensemble of pretty much unknown actors to me. And I feel like it's actors who, 50 years on, most people wouldn't know. I mean, the only thing is the main actor in the movie, here I'll pull up IMDb so I can have their names, was in Roman Polanski's Macbeth the year before.
That's the only thing I've seen him in, and the only thing I've seen anybody else in this movie in, for the most part. One of the actors, what is her name? Give me 1 second. The one who plays the wife of a friend that they hide with for 1 second.
Yeah, they're always hiding with someone.
Yeah,
and it's like, don't hide with him.
Billy Whitelaw, I recognized her. Yeah. She plays the evil nanny in The Omen. She's in this, but otherwise, yeah.
Okay. Who did she play in Frenzy?
She played, her character's name was Hetty Porter. She's the one
Oh,
whose
okay.
husband keeps trying to get the
Oh,
main character there, and she's
yeah.
just being like, and
That's
she
who
does
I.
not believe. Yeah, she does not believe that
Yes,
he's not the killer.
she's great in her few scenes in Frenzy, and she's such a striking look. There's something just slightly off about her look. Like, she's physically beautiful, but there's something kind of sinister about her, which I loved.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
I mean, for the
have
most
I
part,
seen her in something else? It's The
uh-huh.
Omen. That's what it is. Yeah.
And she's good in both movies. For the most part, though, this is not a very glamorous movie start to finish. You know, it's not like the globe-trotting glamour of The Man Who Knew Too Much remake, or, you know, the suave adventure in North by Northwest. This is a very like on the ground, very domestic looking, lower middle class movie full of, and I don't say this as an insult, they're not like, it's not a glamorous cast. None of them really look like movie stars. It's very much
right.
It feels like full of real people. You know, it'd be really easy to make all, you know, the like murder victims be like these glamorous ladies who were struck down in their prime, but they're not. A lot of them are, you know, middle age or so, and they just look like regular people.
Yeah, so the actor from Macbeth is John Finch. He plays Macbeth in Roman Polanski's film that came out, would have been just a few months before this. I believe it came out in December of 71. So this was then, so he worked with Polanski and Hitchcock like back to back. And that's like his kind of his legacy there in film. But yeah, you're right. It's like, these do feel like real people. It's interesting to me because Hitchcock worked with movie stars all the time. Like, I mean, going back to the beginning, he's always working with movie stars. I mean, in just the mid 60s, he's working with Julie Andrews and Paul Newman, two of the biggest stars of the mid 60s. And so I feel like if he wanted to, he could have cast big names in this, and he chose not to. Now, I read in my research that he did, not to say that she was a big star in 71, 72 or anything, but he did meet with Helen Mirren to play the role of Babs.
Okay.
The woman who gets killed off screen when the camera pulls back. And like that could have worked. I mean, I'm not very familiar with Helen Mirren in the early 70s. I feel like
I don't know her prior to like
the first movie I saw her in was like Excalibur in like 81.
Okay. Yeah, that's even earlier than me.
And she looks really young in that movie. So, I mean, she's one of those women, like she always looks like 15, 20 years younger than she really is. So, so I don't know what I don't know the state of her career in the early 70s, but I read that she met with Hitchcock about it and she decided not to do it. I think she might have been offered the part and she decided not to, and then years later regretted it, like because she didn't get a chance to work with him. But it's not like Babs is not a great role by any means. It's kind of like it's, you know, it's like, you know, she has a few scenes of dialogue and a memorable death scene kind of off screen.
She's kind of just there as fodder for the most part.
Yeah. And then I don't know if he was offered the role, but apparently Michael Caine was in conversation, at least, to play the villain.
He's kind of styled like him at this time. He kind of looks like Michael Caine in Alfie. The hair, the suits.
He looks just like Michael Caine.
Yeah. Kind of like a B tier Michael Caine.
Yeah. So
like
that's
a bit of a step down.
Barry Foster, who was in the documentary. So he passed away in 2002, and the Frenzy documentary came out with the DVD collection in 2001. So they got him right at the end before he died. And he was talking about how the reason he's in Frenzy is that he was in a 60s film called Twisted Nerve, which I still have not seen, but I've heard is kind of Hitchcockian. Okay. And Hitchcock was turned on to that movie and watched it. And he was like, if I can't have Michael Caine, I'm going to have this look alike.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at this guy's filmography now and I don't recognize anything he's been in. The only big other movie I've seen, I haven't seen this, but I've heard of it, obviously, is Ryan's Daughter. But
okay. Oh, he's in Ryan's Daughter. I suffered through that for the podcast.
I've never seen it. One day I will. One day I will be sick with the flu or something, and I'll watch that movie.
The Oscar-winning Ryan's Daughter.
I know. That's why I have to get around to it one day.
Yeah, I looked up Anna Massey on Wikipedia last night, and at the top it's like she's best known for her role of Babs in Frenzy.
All right,
like, okay, there you go.
Great.
She was on the documentary too. But there is something I kind of like about this movie, and that I don't recognize everyone in it. I don't know, because it's like a British story. And it feels kind of outside of the other movies he was making at the time. There is something I kind of like about the fact that it's not a bunch of famous names in it.
Right. It kind of reminds me of, in a very, very different sense, when another master of suspense, M. Night Shyamalan, when he kind of took a step back from his studio filmmaking and made
like The Visit,
right, which is very on the ground.
Yeah,
it's a different style of filmmaking. Nobody in it is a big star. Catherine Hahn's in there for a little bit, but it really does feel kind of like a resetting of style. The weird thing about Hitchcock is that, I mean, sure, Topaz and Torn Curtain weren't super well received, but it's not like people were like, Hitchcock's over, I imagine. I mean, I wasn't there in the 60s, but it's kind of strange for him to do a complete reversal with Frenzy like that.
Yeah, apparently he was asked at the time, like, why all fresh face, why actors that we don't know, and he said, I prefer a fresh face, which made me wonder, like, but there's so many movies he made with big stars in them. I wonder if he could have had his way his whole career and just cast anyone he wanted, would he have just chosen a bunch of fresh faces, or did he? I mean, he clearly liked some of these actors like James Stewart and Cary Grant, who he would have in a lot of movies, Ingrid Bergman,
Joan Fontaine.
So it seems like I think he recognized, I mean, he knew the game. I think he recognized, like, more people will see this movie if I get James Stewart versus an unknown.
Right, or it will help to get the movie made.
Yeah.
Versus this movie kind of feels unconcerned with the audience reaction, both in terms of the cast and the look of it and the content. It is not a very friendly movie. It is not something you can just throw on. It is really grimy, and not even just the murders. It is very kind of just like an unpleasant world to be in. Everybody's kind of snarling. Nobody seems really happy. It's a very like cynical movie.
But I do feel like at some point, I mean, his name is so recognizable that I mean, they can sell a movie with his name. He doesn't need to get huge stars. I think by Frenzy, it's like, I don't need to get big names in this. I can just sell it as a Hitchcock movie, which I don't know if
he would usually be in his own trailers. Like, how many directors can say that?
Did you? I don't know why. I don't think I've ever seen the Frenzy trailer, and it's not quite the Psycho trailer where it's just Hitch talking to us for 7 minutes that goes on. Have you seen that one on Psycho?
Yes, so he gives the tour of the house. It's great.
And he's like, and he gives away spoilers and stuff. He'll be like, oh, there was a grisly murder here. The guy came down the stairs and the body just, and it's like,
they were less concerned with spoilers back then. It was kind of like, whatever.
But Frenzy opens with his body floating across the water.
Oh my God.
And he's got the hat on and everything. And
that's so funny, putting himself in the place of these women who've been murdered.
I know.
And a strange one-to-one there, Hitchcock.
The best part of the trailer is him like searching. It's like the scene in the movie where he's searching for his pin in the potatoes. And like in the trailer, it's Hitchcock like searching through, and he's like throwing out potatoes, and then a giant, like, a foot comes up, and he's like, oh, I've heard of rack a lamb or something. And he's like,
come on.
And he's making jokes about this human foot, and he's like looking around, like hoping no one catches it. It's really funny. I really like it.
You wonder if they shot that during the movie. Like, did they film the take with the villain and then go, okay, cut, okay, reset for Hitchcock, and then he got in there and he did his thing,
Yeah, I mean, so I read that they shot Frenzy in the summer of 1971. The movie opened, at least opened in the US in June of 1972.
Yeah.
I always feel like he shot his trailers later, like after the movie was done.
Probably,
I mean, because the Psycho trailer, it's not even Janet Leigh screaming at the end in the shower. It's Vera Miles who plays her sister in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I've always found that weird. Like, they couldn't get Janet Leigh to come over for 30 minutes and do the screen.
Maybe they really didn't want to give it away. They were giving away spoilers about what happens, but not to whom it happens.
I don't think they spoil in the Psycho trailer that it's Norman Bates. I don't think.
No, I mean, that would be ridiculous. Well, the whole thing with Psycho was they would not permit you to enter if the movie had already started, because they want to give away the ending at all.
No, I think he even like put out a press release of like they're casting older women to play the mom, just to make, but not to say that like everyone in the country was seeing that press release, but just to give the illusion that they're casting for the older woman, the mom.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he would do stuff like that. It's just like, it's fantastic. After North by Northwest of all movies, be like, I'm going to make like a little black and white horror film. It's like,
I know, probably felt kind of unassuming at the time compared to the big, CinemaScope globe-trotting movies he was making in the 50s.
Yeah. Well, that's what the film Hitchcock is about. Have you seen 2012's Hitchcock with Anthony Hopkins and Helen Mirren?
I don't remember it very well. I remember not.
Yeah, it's not great.
No,
it's not great, but it was of interest to me because it's about, like, it opens with the premiere of North by Northwest. And then it's about everything to do with the making of Psycho, from casting to Scarlett Johansson plays Janet Leigh, if I remember right.
Okay,
that was odd.
I can see that. I don't know.
It was okay. And I've always thought they need to make a biopic or something about Anthony Perkins' relationship with Tab Hunter, because Andrew Garfield looks like Anthony Perkins.
Every time I'm on this podcast, you bring up Andrew Garfield. He's always
we work him in. We work him in. Someone needs to make that.
I would love that, with a little bit of Sondheim in there, his other boyfriend. That'd be great.
I don't know. I don't know if there's ever going to be a movie about the making of Frenzy, but I mean, hey, again, like Hitchcock leaning into the R rating. Hitchcock was of an age here. He's like 70, 71 years old. Even though he's able to do an R-rated, you think like he'd made so many movies, he'd probably just want to stay in his wheelhouse and make it PG and keep it classy and like not dirty things up. Like the fact that he's like, no, let's do it, let's go for it. It's kind of surprising to me.
Even if I didn't. The thing about this movie is I didn't really like it, but even in not liking it, I did kind of respect. This is somebody who's been making movies a certain way for a long time.
Yeah.
And he's not exactly changing it up, but he's definitely stretching his abilities here and doing approaching the story from a different angle than he might have 10 years earlier, censorship or not.
Yeah. So let's get into our just overall thoughts. I have a few more pieces of trivia here, but let's kind of get into our thoughts. So I had not seen this in a while. I did a year of Hitchcock. I was like, there were like 10 to 15 of his films I still hadn't seen a few years back. So I did a year of his films in order. And there's this great book. It's I had it at some point. It's 52 Weeks of Hitchcock. And because in a career of, so his first film was The Pleasure Garden in 1925. His last film was Family Plot in 76. And in those 51 years, he made about 51 films. Like it's about,
I love that.
So he's one of the rare directors, like you could study his work for a year and watch one film a week, and it basically gets you from January to December. You get to watch the whole thing, starting in silent films to 70s. And someone wrote a book. It was like 52 chapters and like talked about his films, and it was real. And I just did that, and it was great. And there were some of his early films, like the late 20s, early 30s, that I had never seen before. But I want to say Frenzy I'd only seen maybe twice before. I'm trying to remember if I saw it in high school. I feel like 15, 16-year-old Brian Rowe would have sought out the R-rated Hitchcock movie. Sure. I feel like I must have seen it at some point. The attack scene early on with the nudity and with her screaming, I have pretty like a memory of that scene. I feel like I know I'd seen that scene when I was younger. Mm-hmm. But here's my thing with Frenzy. I feel like the first half hour and the last half hour are kind of slow. And I'm just like, you get to know the characters at the beginning. We open with a solid, like it's a decent scene of the body washing up to shore and them screaming and discovering this nude woman. And I mean, I like that it opens with like the plot kicking into gear right away. We don't have to wait 20 minutes for something to happen. Like it opens right away. We get the great Hitchcock cameo twice. He's in two shots. Did you notice Hitch at the beginning? In the crowd?
Yes, he couldn't get out of the way, and I was like, Hitch, get out of the way. He was taking up space. I thought it was a little much.
Well, I like that cameo because do you know the reason why he appeared in his films in the beginning?
Didn't it start like they needed to fill the screen or something?
Yeah, there was I believe, I guess I'm not 100% on this. I'm pretty sure they needed a crowd for The Lodger 1927, and he just was like, well, let's get some of the crew members to come in and I'll be in it. Like we need to fill up this frame with the crowd. So I think the reason he first did it was just to add necessity to add on to the crowd of people. And then because I feel like some of his earlier works, he's not in all of them. Like it's not like from the beginning he's in everything. It was something that it became, I think by the mid 30s, it became kind of an in-joke, and his films were gaining in popularity to the point where people were starting to recognize him and like, oh, the director's in each movie. And so it became, at some point, this is something I have to do for every movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very much, he becomes a trademark, both style and name wise, and also just his appearance. I mean, that's why he put himself in the trailers. I'm sure he had that TV show. Just a lot of, he's a recognizable person in a way that I'm sure, you know, half of the directors of today's movies, I don't know what they look like.
Yeah, isn't that weird to think? There's like just was talking to a friend. We saw Men the other day by Alex Garland. I didn't even know what he looked like until I pulled up a documentary on YouTube about Ex Machina. I was like, I don't even know what this guy looks like.
I have no idea. No,
and he's very handsome. He's a good-looking chap.
All right. Well, if I see him, I won't know who he is.
But
so.
But yeah, by the time the show aired, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, everyone knew him. And I think after the show had been on for a while, Hitchcock said, my cameo has to be in the first few minutes because people at this point are looking for it and they will not be paying attention to the plot.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I feel like a lot of times they were in sort of transition scenes, you know, it'd be like an establishing shot of a building,
transition,
or character getting on a train or something like that.
Yeah, but like what it always surprises me, his cameo in Psycho, because it's not in the beginning. We have a long scene with Janet Leigh. Obviously, I don't think we could have Hitchcock in the hotel room. I don't think that would have worked.
No.
like him just like opening the door, like, oops, wrong room or something. That wouldn't have worked. But he's like standing like his back's to the camera in the Psycho cameo, and he's like outside,
it's like a window.
And it's like he's at the corner, like Janet Leigh just walks in, and it's very brief. And I feel like you have to really be paying attention to see that that's him. But most of the cameos are very clear, like the beginning of The Birds, where he walks out of the bird shop with the dogs. This is fantastic. And then Frenzy here, he's like right in the middle of the frame.
He's just
like, you can't miss him.
Screen. Yeah.
And he looks very sad. There. He's just like, he doesn't have any joy on his face.
I know, like, it feels like I have to do this. If I don't do this, they'll ask me why I didn't do it. So let's just get it out of the way.
But he's famously almost always in one shot, and so it's weird. In Frenzy, you see him a second time, he's like crowding, he's like in the bottom of the frame for like 10 seconds, and he's like trying to look over to the water, and it's like, why would he put himself in two shots?
Yeah, it's really self-aware in a way that I don't like. Get out of the frame.
I'm not a fan of the opening shot of Frenzy. I don't really like the music that's playing. Like it's just so booming, and it's like we're about to watch like Mary Poppins or something. Like,
or like a travel log or something, some sort of documentary about jolly old London.
So Hitchcock hired Henry Mancini, the great Henry Mancini, to score Frenzy. And Henry Mancini played his score. He composed the score for Hitchcock. And Hitchcock at one point turned it off and said, if I had wanted Bernard Herrmann, I would have hired Bernard Herrmann.
Okay.
And he fired him, and he got someone else to come and score the movie.
And this is the better score.
And on the documentary, The Story of Frenzy, on the DVD, they play Henry Mancini's opening theme over the opening shot. And it's so much more subtle. It's got a little bit of menace to it. It's still a little bit like celebratory. It's not the Psycho score. It's not like that. But it's like, oh my God, this is so much better.
So
what are you thinking, Hitchcock?
Well, the thing about this movie is we keep talking about how graphic it is, how upsetting it is, how it's such an R-rated movie. There is like a weird glee to it. It is not funny. There's some funny moments. So I think if they had that menacing tone from the beginning, then it might make the comedy like kind of feel really jarring.
Yeah.
But I don't like the score. It is not a pleasant sound. It's like sonically unpleasant. It's very obnoxious. not for me.
It's okay for me because it opens with this crowd scene and this guy talking, and he's very energetic. And so it's not like if the shot had ended with like a close-up of the dead body in the water, that would have not worked at all. Sure. But because it's like, it's kind of setting up this crowd scene, I'm like, I can go with it. But it's just, it doesn't open the movie on the right note for me. Like that music, it just was like, what are we watching here? What is this?
Right notes, yeah.
But I at least like that we get a hint of the story at the beginning. Oh, there's this necktie killer. He's out there. He's going to be one of these characters we meet in the next few minutes, and that gives the movie a little tension early on. But for about 30 minutes, not a whole lot is happening, and we're just kind of being introduced to the characters and their lives, and it drags a little bit. And my major note with this whole movie is it's an hour and 55 minutes. I feel like they tighten the beginning and tighten the end. I think 10 to 15 minutes easy could be shaved off this thing. And if it was like a tighter 1 hour 35, 1 hour 40, and we kept everything in the middle the same, because I think the middle hour is great Hitchcock. I love the middle hour. Like the middle hour for me is great.
And it's just not And I'm not somebody who needs my movies to be filled with likable characters, because I really think that's kind of a lazy critique whenever I see that. Like I couldn't relate to the characters. It's like, okay, maybe you weren't supposed to, but they really push it with this movie. That main character is really not easy to root for. He right away is shown as being kind of like a degenerate. They talk about he like maybe like was physically abusive to his ex-wife, so it's really hard to get on board right away with like caring that this guy is being.
You're talking about the main guy who's not killing.
No, but
John Finch's Richard.
Yeah, it becomes apparent even before it happens that he's going to get set up to be accused of the killer. It's kind of the point of the movie, so it's not really a surprise. And you're kind of like, okay, so like I don't really care.
Yeah, I guess that's one area where a movie star might have helped, because John Finch, there is like a sinister quality to him, and you're never really like on board with him. You're not like rooting for him ever. Right. There's something kind of seedy about him, like his physical look and his character, and so you're never like you're never rooting for the guy.
I think that might be part of the point in a way. Like I'm just thinking about it. A theme of the movie could be it could be said it's about even people that aren't good people don't deserve to get wrongly accused, which is, sure, I can get behind that, but it is also a fictional movie and I have to enjoy my time watching it. And I don't really enjoy my time watching this movie.
You didn't enjoy your time watching Frenzy?
It was okay. I think it's by default my least favorite Hitchcock, but that's because I haven't seen a lot of the like more famous lower tier ones.
We'll put on Topaz.
I will, and then this will look great in comparison.
I think part of the reason Frenzy looks so great at the end is that I just feel like it's just so much better and more entertaining than Torn Curtain, Topaz, and Family Plot. Those three are pretty rough.
Yeah, and I'm sure it probably did feel like a nice return to form after those movies. Like it is definitely closer to Psycho than to some of his other bigger movies. So in that way, I can see why people liked it and continue to like it to this day. It's still pretty, for the most part, pretty well regarded. But in a vacuum, watching it by itself, I kind of was not. It didn't really do much for me.
So let's get to the first big attack scene. This is probably the most famous scene of the movie because it has nudity and it's just so shocking in its brutality. In a way that I think 50 years later, it's still really horrific. And he does not move the camera away for this one.
No, as we know, it's a 50-year-old movie. And I was watching it like really, I felt really uncomfortable. And that's fine. I'm not somebody who needs my movies to make me feel good. I think it's an effective piece of filmmaking. It is just deeply unpleasant though.
Deeply unpleasant. I think part of the reason that it works so well is that there is no music. I think that the no music of the moment makes it feel like you're caught up in the reality of it's actually happening, and it's like close-ups of both characters back and forth. And I think her name's Barbara Lee Hunt. Barbara Lee Hunt plays Brenda, the first woman we see get killed, and I think her performance in that scene is really great. Like it's like you sense her fear like a lot.
And she's tries bargaining, she tries all sorts of stuff, all sorts of different approaches to no avail.
I mean, obviously, I wish she could have just like socked the guy in the nose and like just really like, but she's pressed up in a like, and this is a big, clearly like intimidating figure. This guy, has a lot of power over her in that moment, and there's only so much she can do. And it's just one of those moments that you're right. It's not entertaining to watch it, but there's clearly a lot of filmmaking craft going on in that scene in terms of the editing and the way it's shot, and it leaves an impression. You do not forget that scene after this movie is over.
And it is well crafted, but it's not concerned with being cinematic, and I think the lack of music, that's part of it. Movies of the 50s and 50s especially, but 40s and 60s too, were just like wall to wall filled with score. There was just unending music that's just kind of meant to clue the audience in at all times to be aware of what they're supposed to be feeling and how they're supposed to be reacting to what they're seeing. And this movie and movies of the 70s, for the most part, kind of started to do away with that, which I think it's smart. I think it's a more mature way to like convey what's going on in the movie. It trusts the audience more, for sure.
And it's just really strange to see Hitchcock lean into showing everything, including the nudity, because up until this movie in his long career, it's always been suggestive. We don't ever see anything. And it's not only that we see this woman's breasts, it's like full on close up of the guy just ripping her clothes off.
Yeah.
And like the camera is really close to her body. And it's just real. It's like, it's not something you think you'd ever see in a Hitchcock movie, because so many of his films, we have the camera placed in a certain position where you can't see anything. It's like the whole point of the Psycho scene, the shower scene, is in terms of where the camera is, that we never see her, you know, her body gratuitously.
Yeah. And even though we know Hitchcock was like a freaky guy, this doesn't feel titillating at all. It's just really unpleasant.
Yeah. Apparently that's a body double in the nudity shots. That's not, it's like a paid body double for those moments. I believe there's another shot of what's her name, the Babs character walking to a bathroom and she's naked, Anna Massey.
In the hotel. Yeah.
And she said on the documentary that was also a body double, that wasn't her. So I feel like I think all the nudity in the movie is not like the main actors, it's like others coming in. What a weird job that would be.
Good gig. Easy. I'm not easy.
It's like that episode. It's like that episode of Friends, right, where Joey doesn't get hired to be Al Pacino's butt double or something.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it. And it makes you think how many times an actor has disrobed in a movie and it's not actually them. Probably much more than we realize.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you don't see the face in the same shot, I mean, probably someone else, right?
You gotta look for the face. And even now, it could be CGI. Who knows? Could be
CGI buttocks.
Or face.
It like pans down from a famous actor's real face to like... He turns around and it's just like CGI butt.
Anything's possible with technology.
Yeah. But so I clocked, it was 30 minutes into the movie. We get this attack scene and we now know it's this guy, Bob. And this is not a whodunit mystery. Who's the killer? We know by the 30-minute mark, this is him. And the reveal of the necktie, I think the strongest, like the most memorable moment for me is her scream when he comes at her with it's just like you can feel her terror in that scene that you don't often feel in horror films, when a character, often a female, screams at the top of her lungs as the killer lunges at her with the weapon. Like you really feel her terror in that moment in a way you don't in a lot of other films.
Right. Well, you can tell she probably was thinking, okay, this guy's going to assault me. It's going to be horrible, but once it's over, I can get away from this. So you know, and then once she realizes she's not going to get away from this, it's really a very specific kind of scary.
It's like the scream is the recognition that she's going to die. It's not like, oh my God, he's coming at me with a weapon. It's a scream of like, oh my God, my life is over, kind of a thing. And
it's really
you feel it in the scream. You see it in her eyes. And Hitchcock's like the camera just close up on her face, and he doesn't cut away, right? And it's amazing. It's really good filmmaking and acting.
It's really it's great filmmaking. It is unpleasant as a human to watch.
Yeah. Now, having said that, this is something I've never noticed before. There is a wide shot after she dies, where you see her, like full on, like head to like bottom of her stomach, and Barbara is full on breathing for a good 15 seconds, like full on. You see the chest, like, and I know it's hard. It's hard when you're in a wide shot and you're supposed to be dead to just not breathe, right? Because you don't know how long the director's going to have the shot running before he says cut. And I guess the mentality might be like, okay, just breathe like a little bit, right? But if you go back and look at the wide shot, I was like, oh my God, it's not just a little bit. Like she's clearly like breathing in and out. So the character of Brenda is not dead.
Okay. Fan theory.
Fan theory. Brenda made it. But no, other than that little goof, which is, it's in Psycho too. She breathes in Psycho. Like she like right before the camera pans away from Janet Leigh, you see her take a breath, like you see like the neck. Have you ever noticed
well, that shot always freaks me out. The way that she had to just lay there for so long. It's
but really this camera zooming out of her eye.
Painful.
Which has always confused me. And maybe I'm just like seeing that with my own eyes, because there's this famous story of they were cutting together the shower scene in Psycho and the ending of her with the camera zooming out. And it was Hitchcock's wife, Alma Revel, who often collaborated with him on many of his films, didn't often take credit. So, many books written about this and stories about it. But apparently Alma Revel said, you can't use this. Janet Leigh just took a breath there. But then when I watch Psycho in that shot, like, I feel like you see her take one breath. You see her neck move. Like you see this part, like you see like her take a breath. I know it's like
part of the legend of it all, but yeah.
So maybe Hitch was like, yeah, we're good.
Like, I don't really care. Personally, I don't care.
Does that not bother you if a character's supposed to be dead in a movie and you see them breathing?
Really. Not too much. I know it's fake. I'm not really somebody who gets hung up on goofs or even like light plot holes. They don't really bother me.
No. Okay, my favorite goofs of all time are when we see like crew and camera equipment in the shot. That's my favorite.
Always enjoy that because I think it adds a bit of. It feels like a time capsule in a way. It's like, oops, this was somebody who was shooting the film who didn't think they'd be in the film.
And it's not that interesting if it's like you see a little bit of a boom mic for 2 seconds, like whatever. It's when like you see full on, when you see in the movie Duel, you see Steven Spielberg reflected in a mirror standing there with his cameraman for like 10 seconds. And Spielberg says on the DVD, he's like, yeah, we were making the movie so quickly, I didn't have time to look at dailies or anything. It wasn't until the movie was done that I watched. Oh shit! There I am.
So funny. I love that.
There's at least 2 shots in Speed where Keanu's like running alongside the bus, and you see the cameraman like right behind him in the reflection. Love all that stuff.
I always think of there's one shot in the movie Crossfire from the 40s. That film noir,
where you see the cameraman.
Yes, there's a mirror shot, and the like camera moves past the mirror, and for a second you see the person like with the camera and their eyes are for some reason glowing, and it's really scary. It's really hard not to notice. It just jumps out right away. I paused the movie to be like, what am I looking at? Yeah, it's really unnerving, but I love it.
Yeah. So it happens. My very first film I made in high school, the main character was supposed to be dead at the end, and she kept breathing. And I was like, you can't breathe.
Yeah, it's tough.
And she's like, well, I did like a long like dolly shot with a wagon. That's how cool I was back in 2001, 15-year-old Brian. I had a wagon where I like taped the camera to the end of the wagon, and I moved the wagon across a hardwood floor to see the dead person. And she kept breathing, and I'm like, you can't breathe. And she's like, okay. So she tried it once. Annoying. She tried it once where she didn't breathe, and then I was almost done, and then she went. And so okay, I don't want to injure this person. So I'm like, can you just breathe just very softly? And
that's very director of you to be like, would you mind not breathing? Would you mind just not being a human for 2 seconds?
Yeah. This is the movie that I dedicated to Alfred Hitchcock when I was in high school. So I guess maybe a little bit of Hitch came down to me in the way I talk to actors.
The way didn't he call actors cattle? Or something like that? They're just there to be.
I don't think he said they're cattle. I think he said they should be treated like cattle.
Even better. Great.
So I don't think he was the best actor's director. Although you hear stories from some people that said he was fantastic. Like I think Kim Novak has only had great things to say about him. That he was a fantastic director. And so you heard mixed things about that. But
I mean, the thing is, he did get people to return over and over again, and it was different back then. Where stars would make moves less based on their time enjoying things, mm-hmm. I'm sure, and more about what would be good for their stardom. But
Grace Kelly didn't have to come back for 2 more, did she? Because she was pretty much after she worked with him, then she was done with movies forever.
Well, but then maybe that's why. Maybe she went, I'd rather.
That's a good point. Maybe she was like, well, I could keep working with Hitch, but he wanted. Did you know the story? He wanted Grace Kelly to come back and be in Marnie, and that doesn't surprise me. Considered it, and like the people in her circle were like, you can't go back and play a thief in a movie. So she had to step out. But there was a moment there where she was thinking about coming back for one more film. And that, Tippi Hedren is great in Marnie. That would have been a really interesting piece of cinema history if Grace Kelly, who had been away at that point for 8 years, had come back for one more role with Hitchcock. I think Marnie would be thought of, it'd be more in the consciousness.
Yeah, it'd be more of an interesting footnote because it would have that thing about it.
Yeah, but Very, very interesting. Other than that little goof, I mean, I just think that's a really, unpleasant but well made, well acted scene. I think I think the movie needs that scene. I can't imagine the movie if like he started attacking her and the camera dollied out of the room and then you heard her scream and then we cut to black in the next scene. I think you need one unpleasant violent scene in this movie.
Sure, yeah,
right, to make it to really introduce the menace of this guy. We need to see it once, but what I think is so smart is we don't really see it again. Like I think it would have been overkill.
Yeah, I think you get all you need,
no pun
to get out of it. Yeah, well, and the next murder, you don't see the murder exactly, but you see the after effects, and that's not just as horrifying, but it's still horrifying.
Yeah, but I feel like after that murder scene, I feel like the movie finds its footing. I feel like for about an hour, like the pacing is amped up a bit. Then we get more of like the wrong man narrative, and he's like, people are blaming him. Richard, the character of Richard, and he's like, it wasn't me, and there's all these women like blaming him, like it was you. And I feel like the scenes move a little faster, and there's more entertainment. There's some more dark humor and more playful kind of cinematography from Hitchcock throughout. I love that amazing shot of Babs walking towards the camera, and then she just kind of dips out, and then you see the killer right behind her, like a close-up of him in the same shot.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite shots of the movie. And then that leading into probably the other famous scene of the film, which is him taking her upstairs to his room to give her a space to stay for a while, right?
I think so. I wasn't super clear on that. Why they were going there.
Like, didn't she just quit her job, right? I think doesn't she feel some danger from like Richard, like that he might come after her, like that she thinks he might be the killer?
She's the one who worked in the pub. Yeah. So possibly.
But he takes her up to his space. I think they know each other. I think she's friendly with him and doesn't think that
he like lingers around the pub. It seems like doing God knows what.
But I feel like the other famous moment is when he takes her in, and it's the second kill scene that this time we don't see. But he says the same line to her as he said to the other woman at the beginning, to Brenda. And as soon as that door closes, we know she's dead, like she's gone.
Yeah.
And instead of showing it, we have that amazing shot of like the camera, like we follow them all the way upstairs, and the camera goes backwards all the way back outside of the building and across the street, which is really cool, like really innovative shot for 72.
It is very cool. I do like, you can see if you watch closely, there's I think at least one cut, which I'm fine.
The cut's
really
obvious.
Seamless.
I thought the cut was pretty obvious.
It works for me. I like that shot. I don't really know what the point of it is thematically. With impressive camera shots like that, I feel like in movies a lot of times it's just kind of like the director showing off. Like a lot of one takes are very showy on purpose. A lot of them are thematically important or help to emphasize what's happening in the moment and give it a sense of feeling in the artistry of the movie. This, I'm not really quite sure what I would say that is the point, besides it being cool, which it is. I mean, it kind of really does make the moment that it makes their area feel small, like she's being pulled out of this world almost. But I don't know. It didn't feel like the most thematically relevant.
So for you, he could have followed her into the room and shut the door, and we could have just dissolved to black and into the next scene. Like you didn't need to have that.
It's not that I didn't need it, because I still liked watching it, but I do wish I could say what exactly I thought was the point of it.
I took it to mean like this. When was that shot last? Maybe a minute and a half, something around there. I took it to mean like this is the length of time that now he's killing her. But instead of watching it happen in real time, we have to use our imaginations as to what's going on in that room as we're dollying out of the building. That's how I kind of take it.
It also does. It does. Now I guess I gotta give it up to that. It also does make it feel. She feels very alone because you don't even hear anything happening, even though you know what's happening. And
I love the creep factor of not even hearing anything, not hearing a scream. Definitely. It's just silent. It's just like people are downstairs, like walking back and forth and going about their days, like nothing bad is happening and nobody knows. It's just a few feet away someone's being killed. and we don't hear any of the.
You convinced me.
There's
Good job.
I don't think it's just there for Hitch to be like, check out this camera shot, which I think a lot of directors will do that in movies. Exactly. Where it's like it's just there for.
Obviously, I trust Hitchcock more than I do most directors, so I imagine there was thought behind it. Clearly, when a lot of times I feel like there is less thought behind it, more just what can we do that's cool.
I do like that we later get a flash, very quickly cut flash of the murder, like just to understand like why the killer is jumping into that that truck filled with potatoes. Like I think we need to see a brief moment of her as she's getting attacked, snatching the pin. And so but I like how quickly cut it is, and it's kind of like it's like close-ups on their eyes and stuff, and you're not seeing it the same way we saw the first murder, and it's later. So I thought that worked really well. And I feel like if there's a third memorable sequence, it's of Bob retrieving his pin and the truck. I mean, like, there's really no dark humor at all in the attack scenes, but there's a lot of Hitchcock's trademark dark humor in Bob trying to retrieve his pin from
it's definitely
her hand, which is like full on he can't even get like the hand to open at all.
And the weird thing about it is you're not rooting for him exactly, but it does make you kind of go like, oh, just get it before they get you. Like it feels, it puts you in a weird perspective and like mindset almost, because you don't want him to find the pin and therefore get away with it. But also the scene is so tense and comical that you want it to wrap up, and therefore you want him to find the pin.
Yeah, it's something Hitchcock was, I would say, even gifted at, in putting us on the side of the killer often and making us like want them to be okay. Like, I think he hires just really kind of suave male actors who attractive to look at, and there's something about them that pulls you in, and and I'm thinking about, I mean, like the big one is we don't know he's the killer yet, but I think the most famous instance of that is in Psycho, when we're watching Norman Bates watch the car that is storing Janet Leigh's body, Marion's body, going down into the water, and then the car stops for a moment and doesn't go completely under.
Yes.
And you're like,
uh-oh.
And we have just spent 40 plus minutes with this character, Marion Crane, and now we're like hoping the car goes under the water. It's very strange, but I feel weird, that every time you're like, no, go down. And it's like, why am I feeling that?
Exactly. Like
we don't dislike her. We're sad for her.
Yeah.
Why are we rooting for the car to go down?
It's so interesting. Right. You are kind of just like, oh, go down though. Come on, get under the water. But no, but this woman that you were rooting for in a way is locked in that trunk. So
yeah, there's a little bit of that with the bad guy Bruno in Strangers on a Train, when he's like stalking the wife of Guy at the amusement park. And it's not that we're rooting for him to kill her, but it's not like we're not rooting for her to get away either.
Exactly. It's like such an interesting it's making you as the audience not root for them exactly, and not even find them sympathetic, but you're waiting for the resolution, which is
kind of tricky. It's that tense that tense element. But in Frenzy, on that truck, you're like rooting for him to get the necktie pin. It's like you get
exactly
because he's just like, I mean, we're with it for minutes on end, and he's like, what is he? He's like cracking the bones in the fingers just to like get breaking the bones.
I mean, it's the rigor mortis. Yeah, it's a lot.
And like when he gets out of the truck and I'm like, oh my God, is someone gonna see him? Like, dude, go hide. Like someone's gonna see you. And I'm like, this is the killer. This is someone we just watched brutally attack and kill a woman a few scenes ago. Why are we rooting for this guy to get away? Like, it's just so bizarre.
Like, I respect that filmmaking. And again, I don't love this movie, but there's little moments like that where I'm like, okay, Hitchcock, okay, I see what you're doing here. Nice job.
But I mean, that could have been a scene that took a minute and a half. He gets on there, he finds her body, grabs the pin, he jumps out. Exactly. Hitchcock is like, no, we're gonna stay on this for a while. And so I thought that sequence works really well. And so yeah, there's at least 3 moments that stick out to me in the long scope of Hitchcock's 50-year career. that I feel like who said like every great movie needs 3 great scenes, no bad scenes. I think that someone said that.
Yeah. I don't
Unfortunately,
know who that is,
Frenzy has bad scenes too, so that doesn't quite work. But it has 3 great scenes for me. I don't know. Let's see what else about the movie. We have to talk about the food, the trademark with Hitchcock and his food. First, we get that the inspector character like full on inhaling that meal. What was it, like sausage? And I mean, it's like the scene goes on for 2 minutes and he's actively eating the whole scene.
Yeah, and he even says something like, to eat a good meal in England, you have to have breakfast 3 times, which is feels very self-aware for an English person to be making that.
Yeah. But then we get this. I mean, it's so Hitchcock. I don't think this would have been in any other movie by a different director. If anyone else had made Frenzy, I don't think we'd get, I mean, at least 2, if not 3 scenes of the inspector at home with his wife serving him all these weird meals. And that soup looked so gross. I mean, that is maybe the most disgusting.
It's so gross. And it was a soup de poisson. So it's fish soup. And girl, you don't need to put the fish's head in it. You don't have to do that. That was too much.
And her just total glee in everything she's making in the kitchen. And every time she turns away, he's like dumping it out. But like we get like classic full-on Hitchcock close-ups of him. What is that, like pig's feet and some sort of yellow goop? And he's like, and he's like trying to cut it to eat it, and it like he can't quite get it to do anything. And then we see him chewing it for at least a minute. He's just chewing, and then he spits it out.
It's just gross all around. And on one hand, I do feel bad for the wife who clearly is just trying to make interesting meals for her husband.
Yeah,
her husband isn't properly communicating. Like, honey, I don't like this. Can you just make sausage and eggs like everybody else? It's a strange.
And the last scene with them, it's like I got the sense that this is a way to give us exposition about the plot in a way that doesn't feel like a guy just sitting at a table giving the audience exposition. Adding the food element gives the scene a sense of humor, and we're kind of like half paying attention to what he's talking about and half to the food. So it gives the scene a little bit more life than it was if it was just him like giving us more about the plot. I don't know. I do think that last scene with them goes on a long time, considering we're almost at the end of the movie. I mean, it's like 5-6 minutes, maybe more. It just goes on.
It's kind of an important scene plot-wise, but there's still this business going on. It's bizarre.
Yeah, and so we get towards the end. We get Richard gets arrested. He's in a jail of some kind for a little while, right? But then he breaks out, and the inspector is on his case. And the ending is really interesting too, because the inspector walks in right at the moment that Richard is standing with a weapon over the body of a dead woman, naked with a necktie around her.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen this movie in a while. And I was like, wait, how does this? I forgot how it ended. I always forget how it ends.
I know.
Was like,
I thought they were going to do.
Is this going to be? Yeah. What did you hadn't seen it before? So what were you thinking at that moment?
I mean, I kind of assumed things were going to write themselves. And in that moment, I thought they were going to do something much more interesting where he was set up to find the body and get caught red-handed, or somebody else is in the bed and he killed them thinking it was the actual killer. I don't know, something more interesting than what it is, which is just kind of like a brief twist, a brief subversion of expectation, and then it kind of just resolves the way you think it would resolve.
Yeah, I mean, the inspector is standing in the room as Bob comes in with this giant suitcase, this giant suitcase, and the inspector says, "You're not wearing your tie." And that's it. And it works well enough for me. I like just like the brevity of it. It's just okay. And then the roll credits. But I'm like, okay, couldn't the killer just like full on attack the inspector in that moment and maybe make a run for it or something? It feels like it's not like they're taking him out in handcuffs at this moment. So I guess you're just left to think, oh, okay, the killer got caught. Like we're done. I guess that's what you're supposed to think.
It's also kind of like, well, thank God you escaped from jail. So that's because you were able to help us figure out this murder. So
yeah, but I'm like, whoa, you got lucky there that the killer showed up when he did, because it did not look good for Richard.
No. Yeah.
I'm like, that's some bad luck, right? Because he thinks he's hitting Bob, he's hitting the killer in bed, and it's not. it's like not a good look.
Yeah, it's again, it feels like it could be interesting or something different, and then it kind of just isn't.
Yeah, so that's not one of the most memorable parts of the movie. I think it works fine. It's not great. It's okay. But I still think there's enough in this movie that would make me recommend it, especially to Hitchcock fans. I think if you're a Hitchcock fan and you haven't seen like the last 4 films, this is the one to see. Sure. Like if you're gonna look at one of the last 4, it's not of the same caliber as his best work by any means, but there's a lot of inventiveness, and it's like the last film you watch of his where he seems to be enjoying himself in terms of like the filmmaking craft. Like it feels like he's a little bit more alive as a filmmaker in this one than he is in the other last 2 movies he made.
Yeah, and like you said, I think if you watch it in the full breadth of his filmography, it probably feels like a nice return to form in that era. But just watching it on its own, I found it a little bit of a letdown.
If you're just watching it on its own, if you're just kind of bouncing around his filmography and you look at a couple films from the 40s and 50s, and then you're like, oh, what's this Frenzy? That's kind of an interesting title. Put that on without any context. You're just like, I feel like this would be a weird watch if you don't know when it came out and the context behind it, and that he had done a couple flops before. Mm-hmm. This movie did fairly well at the box office. I couldn't find like a number, but I think it was his last movie to do really well. I think it made some money. The critics really liked it. Did you look at Roger Ebert's review? It's like 4 stars, and it's a rave.
I mean,
rave review.
I think it probably did excite critics at the time because it felt like what we've been saying, which is uninhibited Hitchcock. It is Hitchcock in a new era of filmmaking where they can do whatever they want, and he's going for it. So that's got to be exciting to see this master of suspense who's been working at this point for 50 years finally do something that he clearly has wanted to do for a long time.
Well, Hitchcock by the early 70s was a revered filmmaker. Like Francois Truffaut in the mid 1960s did his famous interview with Hitchcock, and Francois Truffaut's book really just made everyone, including film critics, just really go back and look at his films again, admire his work. And so by Frenzy, I think critics especially were just clamoring for another solid Hitchcock movie. And they might have even recognized it's not of the level of his best, but I think they were like, oh, after Topaz, we'll take anything.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, I mean, Hitchcock. So Ebert says about Frenzy, this is the kind of thriller Hitchcock was making in the 40s, filled with macabre details, incongruous humor, and the desperation of a man convicted of a crime he didn't commit. And it's a rave review of the kind I don't think we saw from Ebert for his other final films. And I think that was something maybe in high school that I was turned on, because I was really into the reviews of Roger Ebert, and I think I saw that he gave his second to last movie 4 stars. So I was like, oh, I gotta check this one out. His daughter Pat Hitchcock did not like this movie.
Oh.
He found it so disturbing that she did not allow her children to see it for many, many years.
I mean, I get it. I don't disagree.
Pat Hitchcock made the right decision to not show her young children Frenzy.
No, you shouldn't do that.
But maybe she was showing, her 3-year-old Psycho. I don't know. Like my dad made them.
Again, black and white, it feels different.
Yeah. I wonder when Pat Hitchcock showed her kids Strangers on a Train, because she's in that movie. She's great. Right? And she's great in that movie.
That'd be the one great role. If I were her, I would show her that. I would show them that first to be like, look what mommy did.
It's mommy.
But that's just me.
From what I've heard from actors is that like most actors' kids want nothing to do with watching their parents in movies. That's the stories I always hear in interviews of like, oh yeah, I tried to show my kid one of my famous films, and the kid's like, Mom, I don't want to watch this.
Interesting.
I think unless you're like a film person, like I think if my dad or mom was an actor, I would have been like, show me everything. Like, this is amazing. But
right, maybe it's just more of the same if you're tired of your parents at home or something. Just to be like, maybe it's like you in a movie.
Yeah. But that's what I feel like Kate Winslet has talked about, that like trying to show her kids, and they're like, I don't want to watch this.
I don't want to watch this.
I think Pat Hitchcock was different. She was always, she was going to film festivals, and she's on like every documentary about her dad's work in the 90s and early 2000s. And she was a great proponent for, talking about celebrating her father's work. And so I really love that about her. She passed away just last year. I think she was like 93, 94. She was with us a long time. Pat Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And so the last note of trivia about Frenzy is that it was not nominated for any Academy Awards, but it did get 4 Golden Globe nominations.
I saw that. That was interesting.
So Golden Globes in 73 recognized this movie for Best Original Score, Best Screenplay, Best Director, and Best Motion Picture Drama. It was also a top 10 Films of the Year winner at the National Board of Review. So I wonder if there was any talk of Hitchcock getting a director nomination for Frenzy at the Oscars.
Right.
I wonder if he was in 7th, 8th place or something like that.
I'm sure he was. And you got to think, like you said, by this point, he's finally getting the prestigious respect he deserves, not just he's a populist filmmaker, his movies make money, every now and then he gets an Oscar nomination. Yeah. I have to wonder if this movie was better received, or if he at this time released a movie that was on the level of Vertigo or North by Northwest or something like that, or even his earlier things, his Strangers on a Train, Notorious. If he released something that was that good, if he would have gotten his Best Director Oscar, if it would have been kind of
actually win,
right?
Okay.
Kind of like a late in his career, almost like Scorsese finally getting his Oscar. If they go, well, we respect you, and you're making a movie that's just as good as it used to be. So those two things lining up mean it's time for you to get your Oscar. But those things never quite lined up, even if Frenzy was appreciated in its time. Somewhat.
Yeah, I feel like today, if there was a famous director who we all knew who had 5 Oscar nominations behind him for Best Director, and he came out with a movie that maybe wasn't his greatest, but was a return to form and was really strong, I feel like that person would have at least been nominated for director today.
Well, you say that, and then I think of Ridley Scott. Couldn't even get in for The Martian. So,
well,
the Oscars are fickle in that way.
Okay, because Ridley Scott hasn't been nominated for director that many times. Thelma and Louise and Gladiator and Black Hawk Down,
might be it.
I think that's it, right?
Yes, I think so.
I think it's just 3.
Still 3 is not bad.
That's not bad. Yeah, I was thinking early on, and let's not go down this road, but just real quick, I was thinking early on that having 2 big dramatic films last year, The Last Duel and House of Gucci, I thought, okay, well, he'll get nominated for one of those. I thought that was a for sure thing. And then that didn't happen. So what is Ridley Scott now? 84, 83?
He's let's see.
I think he's around 83, 84.
He's in his 80s for sure. He's born in the 30s.
He's got, he's 84. He's 84. So he only has a few more movies in him. And so, boy, that's a man who should have an Academy Award for sure. Not to say that Hitchcock didn't win. He did get, was it Irving Thalberg? He got one of those Oscars where he just shows up and receives his award. And his Alfred Hitchcock acceptance speech, would that have been around? I want to say that was in the early 70s. Was that at the 1973 ceremony that Hitchcock got his Oscar? Are you looking it up real quick?
Let's see. I'm looking up very fast.
So
please.
Hitchcock has 5 Oscar nominations.
No, he gets his
what year
Spellbound. It was the 1967 Oscars, so it was the year of In the Heights, or in the heat of the night.
Okay, so the 1968 ceremony celebrating the 67 films.
67 films, yeah.
Okay, so it's already happened. I don't know why I was thinking it was closer to 73, 74. So that's already happened. So that's in 68. And his acceptance speech was just thank you, and he left,
which is pretty badass to just go.
Yeah. So he did win something.
Goodbye.
But even with that recognition, I think if he had come out in the early 70s was just some bonkers, strong, great piece of filmmaking, I think he would have gotten in. So I have my little trusty book here.
Okay.
And so director of 72, we have John Borman for Deliverance, which is a movie coming up very soon on Film at 50. Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather. Joseph L. Mankiewicz for Sleuth. I believe Joseph L. Mankiewicz, that was his last movie he made. Was Sleuth. I think
yeah, he'd been working for a long time.
I heard a story, or I read something he said if Sleuth is well received and does well, I think this is a good one to go out on. He was one of those rare directors. He said, if this one works, I'm out. And Sleuth did great, and so that was the one he ended on. And is it Jan Troell for The Emigrants?
Yes.
Couldn't
tell you how to pronounce it, but I like that movie.
The winner being Bob Fosse for Cabaret.
Of course.
I don't know what Hitchcock could have made that would have beaten Bob Fosse for Cabaret or Coppola for The Godfather. I think those two were probably in the
Right. And I think we mentioned this last time I was on, but those Godfather and Cabaret are so obviously high top tier movies that are still like classics to this day.
Yeah.
That they won 11 awards that night total between the two of them. So there was very little that was getting in past them.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of made all the other nominees in the categories probably feel a bit unnecessary almost.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he slid into Best Director. He'd done it before.
I feel like it would have been kind of cool, like if he had a 6th Oscar nomination for director, and it was like Frenzy's only nomination, but just as to show that from 1940 to the 1970s, this guy was active in the industry, making good work. And I feel like The Emigrants director, you're the guest who said you've seen that and you like that film, right?
Yes, I love it. Yeah.
Okay,
love
so
this
there
film.
you go.
I think it's very good. It's definitely third place for me behind the top two, obviously superior films.
I'm just trying to think of which one of those 5 nominees could you have seen maybe Hitchcock taking the place of.
I think
Sleuth, maybe?
kind of surprised. You would say Sleuth. You would think that because it's not in Best Picture.
It's not in picture, yeah.
But
the actors got nominated.
I'm kind of surprised it's in here, given that it only got 3 nominations, I believe.
Deliverance has a picture nomination, right?
It does, but it feels like it was right on the verge of not getting in. I imagine Sleuth was like right behind it for Best Picture.
Oh, okay.
And Sleuth, which has more nominations, even without the Best Picture nomination.
Wow.
Deliverance.
Did Deliverance not get a single acting nomination?
It didn't, which is weird. It feels weird.
I thought it did.
I mean, no, it didn't. It just got picture, director, and screenplay. Like they got the Licorice Pizza run. So it feels like it wasn't like, obviously they liked it. It got into Best Picture, but it feels like it was close to not getting in. So I wouldn't be surprised if, Sleuth and Deliverance are obviously the 4 and 5 of that category, Best Director.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it would have been a cool just nod to him because clearly, he was 71 years old. Clearly he didn't have a lot more films in him after Frenzy when it came out. So would have been kind of an interesting, like, sometimes I like that. It doesn't happen very often, but when a movie gets 1 Oscar nomination, it's for Best Director.
I love that.
My favorite of all time, of course, is David Lynch getting Best Director nomination for Mulholland Drive, and that's the only nomination the movie got.
And he did it for Blue Velvet too.
Blue Velvet. He did it twice. Yeah,
I love. And both times I would give him the award, even with it being just the only nomination.
It's hard. It's hard when that's the only nomination to be like, he could win it. It's like I was rooting for him on. I was like, don't give it to Ron Howard. Like, give it to Robert Altman or David Lynch. That would have been so cool. But I'm just like, there's no way. They can't. Like, it can't. They're not going to give it to him. I don't think that's. I'd have to do I don't think that's ever happened in Oscar history, right? Where the movie got 1 nomination for Best Director and the director won. I don't think that's. I don't know.
Maybe. There was some weirdness going on in those early ceremonies,
which I've made videos about, and they're just so bizarre.
They didn't. There was
Grand Hotel won Best Picture and didn't get nominated for anything else.
Right, and
that's a
I think,
rarity.
Is it Mutiny on the Bounty? No, not that one. Something else wins
that one did
just
well.
Best Picture. Yeah, it was a weird time in terms of Oscars. They didn't have their own patterns yet because they were still establishing them. They're still figuring out what they value in their awards.
Moving past the 1930s, I think it's unheard of to get 1 nomination for Best Director and then you win. But I think this would be a good time now before we get to our final 2 segments, Cody. I just wanted to briefly talk about kind of Hitchcock's history with the Academy Awards. So he was nominated 5 times. I would suggest that of the 5, I think the one that he probably came the closest to winning was the first nomination he had for Rebecca, since the movie won Best Picture and was a David O. Selznick movie and was very popular and got lots and lots of nominations, and winning Best Picture tells me that he was probably in second place.
I agree. I definitely think he was second place.
And people knew of his work from The Lady Vanishes and The 39 Steps. He wasn't an unknown in 1940.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, it goes to John Ford that year for Grapes of Wrath, which is interesting because he already had won. He won a few years before
for The Informer.
Yeah. I'm not, this isn't off the top of my head. I'm looking at the list, so I'm not that much of a dork. But yes, he won for The Informer, and then he wins again the very next year for How Green Was My Valley, which also wins Best Picture. So it's not like they were giving it to somebody. And again, this is early in the Oscars. They're still establishing their patterns and they're filling in their gaps of who they want to give awards to. But it's not like they had to give it to John Ford because they had awarded him and they would do it again soon.
it's probably one of the most annoying things to me about the Oscars is when I have a favorite twin director, they give it to the other guy, and then the other guy wins it again the next year.
So
what do you remember when this happened recently?
Yes, it was horrible.
Yeah. So
it was a horrible moment.
I was like, if Boyhood can win one award, Richard Linklater spent 12 years making this movie and he did it so well. And it's such a beautiful film. Give Linklater this is probably the only time. This is probably the only time he has a chance to win Best Director at the Oscars. This is the moment.
And I definitely give it to Linklater personally, but I would rather Iñárritu take it for Birdman and then the next year they give it to George Miller. I would take that. That's fine. My thing with Fury Road is that the reason that Revenant won is because they just complained about how hard it was to make. And Fury Road was just as hard to make. They just didn't complain about it. So what are we doing here?
So yeah, when the same guy is accepting it the next year, like so he's got enough. And has Iñárritu made another movie since the Revenant?
He has one coming out this year.
Oh, he does. What's it called?
I don't remember.
Okay, he has. I was like, I was thinking about it a few months ago. I was like, God, it's badass. I believe it's a Netflix
movie. I believe it's in Spanish. I might be wrong.
Oh, okay. I was like, that's pretty badass to win directing prizes 2 years in a row, and then you're just off the grid for 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would respect that more. I don't like his movies like at all.
Oh, okay.
None of them.
Really? So the one I love is 21 Grams. That's the one.
That's his best one, and I still don't love it.
That's the only one I enjoyed watching.
And I think The Revenant looks amazing. It's gorgeous, but. Okay. So it's like
I like his work more than you, but I just was so big on Linklater that year. I was like, this is
I was too.
Yeah. I'm like, I know it should be about the film itself, but I'm like, how many people are going to spend 12 years making a movie? I mean, come on.
But and that is part of the directing, like having that vision for 12 solid years, I think is pretty incredible directing. And it's interesting that like that and Birdman were totally different in terms of their what was impressive about them, because Birdman is impressive because it is all one take. It takes place in this very small window of time, and Boyhood is the opposite. It's this humongous period of time that was filmed in real time. So it's just an interesting dichotomy of what the Academy was valuing that year.
Well, at least it got its nominations and it's there, but I just I think it was deserving of director. But so going back to Hitchcock's first nomination for Rebecca, he loses to John Ford for The Grapes of Wrath, which I guess makes some sense. But I think that was the one. And what makes it okay for me is that Rebecca is a different kind of Hitchcock movie. It doesn't have the feeling and the tone of his later work. So it's not like, in some ways, I'm like, if he had won for something, it would have made more sense in cinema history for it to have been Rear Window or Psycho, one of his like more kind of landmark, thrillers, rather than Rebecca, which is more kind of gothic mystery, kind of quiet drama. It doesn't feel like most of his other movies. I love Rebecca. It's in my top 10 favorite Hitchcock movies, but it's different than everything else he made. It's got a different feel to it, which I love, but it's also, I'm like, well, if he had won the Oscar for that, I don't know if I would love that to be his Academy Award. I don't know. It's just like, because it's not in the wheelhouse of all of his other films, but
I get that. It is weird though that it won Best Picture, and then I think the only other award it won was Best Cinematography. So even though it had a bunch of nominations, so they clearly liked it.
Judith Anderson should have won Best Supporting Actress for that movie as Mrs. Danvers. I love that.
I would maybe even give it Best Actress, possibly.
Well, it went to Supporting Actress, went to Jane Darwell for The Grapes of Wrath, and she the mother in that. She's great in that, so that's okay. So Hitchcock's second nomination is for Lifeboat from 1944, which I feel like that's a nomination for like, good on you, Hitch. Like, you made an entertaining movie that's set in a boat for 90 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, that one feels very much like you're in the club now.
Yeah.
So here you go. But it is weird that like things that they also liked that they gave awards and nominations to, like Notorious and Suspicion, couldn't crack into Best Director, even though they obviously liked it.
Yeah, and this begins his run with Billy Wilder's in a lot of his directing categories that he's nominated in. Billy Wilder was nominated for Double Indemnity for 44. The winner was Leo McCarey for Going My Way. I don't know that name, Leo McCarey. Do you know that name?
He has some good stuff. He's made a lot of movies. He made a lot of earlier stuff. Like, I really love The Awful Truth. Such a good movie.
Okay.
Going My Way though is not good. It is not a good movie.
I don't think I've seen Going My Way.
it's just really uninteresting. It's one of those movies that you look back and you're like, this won 7 Oscars. They really loved this. And it's just not great. That's not an overall incredible year at the Oscars, so I'm kind of okay with it. That's the year of Double Indemnity and Gaslight, which are probably the more fondly remembered movies.
Going My Way is it more comedic? Like, is it more of like a entertaining film?
It's like a kind of a musical.
Okay.
But all the songs are like choir practices, basically. It's very wholesome. You can take the whole family to it. It feels very like we are in the middle of a war and we need something to escape. It's not, there's very little actual high stakes to it. Bing Crosby was a big star. It's just not a good movie.
God, Double Indemnity is so great. I'm surprised. I mean, well, it's enough of a of a genre piece, I guess, that maybe that prevented it from winning Best Picture. But
sure, it's a very elevated film noir, and they did not like film noirs for the most part. So
yeah, but so then the next year they make it up to Billy Wilder. He wins Best Director for The Lost Weekend, a great movie, and that won Best Picture of the year. Hitchcock was nominated that year for Spellbound. And I think I said this before we started recording, like if you were to ask even a major Oscar enthusiast, Hitchcock buff, like what are the 5 movies he was nominated for? I think Lifeboat and Spellbound would be the 2 you could stump most people. I don't think most people would know those. Like sometimes I have to remember.
Yeah, the weirdness about Spellbound is that it kind of, if he had gotten more nominations, you might be like, okay, sure, I understand why they nominated him for that. It got a Best Picture nomination, and it was part of a really fertile time for his creativity in Hollywood. But it does feel weird that it's one of his 5 nominations. I feel like it's not super well remembered nowadays outside of that one dream sequence, the Salvador Dali dream sequence,
which is incredible. What it's most known for
the most part. And I actually just watched this today, so it's very fresh on my mind.
Yes, you said you just watched Spellbound.
Yeah, that's why I had to push the start of this recording time. I was busy finishing it, but it's good. It's definitely, again, it's middle tier Hitchcock. It's an interesting mystery. It's very psychological. It's extremely misogynistic. It doesn't hold up to today's social standards, but very little films do at the time. Obviously, you have to kind of push that to the back of your mind. But it's outside of the dream sequence, I think it's kind of unremarkable. Personally.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Hitchcock's collaboration with Gregory Peck. They made one more film together called The Paradigm Case from 47, which is really rough, really slow, kind of courtroom drama. It is noteworthy. The Spellbound's noteworthy for being his first collaboration with Ingrid Bergman, who I thought he would do much better work the next year with Notorious, with Cary Grant.
Yeah.
And then they worked together also on kind of a forgettable Hitchcock film called Under Capricorn from 49.
Oh, I have not seen that one.
the one to see with Bergman and Hitch is Notorious, of course. For sure. But I didn't know that Spellbound got into picture too. So it was clearly well liked at the time. But,
yeah, that's when they were doing 5 nominations. So like it was part of the story of that year.
The 30s is insane. I did a video recently about Grand Hotel winning Best Picture, and there's like 12 nominees for Best Picture. It's like you can't get it to 10.
Yeah, in case people want to say millennials invented participation trophies, the Oscars were doing it back in the 30s. Every movie that got made got a Best Picture nomination.
I mean, the one year it worked out was 1939, because that's, for many, is the greatest year in cinema history. And
that's
so you look at the list of 39 for Best Picture. You've got Dark Victory, Gone with the Wind, Goodbye, Mr. Chips, Love Affair, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Ninotchka of Mice and Men, Stagecoach, The Wizard of Oz, and Wuthering Heights. I mean, that's just like, if you've never seen a movie before, just start with that list.
Right. And the worst one on that list is probably Goodbye, Mr. Chips. And even that is just fine.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's not one bad film on that list. Usually, like, you go back to the 30s and maybe even the 40s, like one of the Best Picture nominees today is like, Like, I feel like that list for 39 is pretty spectacular. So Billy Wilder wins for the 45 films for Lost Weekend. Have you seen The Lost Weekend?
Yes, it's great. I'm really that's one of those rare early Best Picture wins that I agree with.
Yeah, Ray Milland, he won Best Actor for that. He's great in that. And then we get there was a long stretch of time where Hitchcock was kind of underperforming. You know, even Rope, which we all really admire today, that was not a big hit at the time, and he was kind of experimenting. And his kind of return to form was Strangers on a Train in 51. I think that got one nomination. We did an episode about last year. I want to say it was cinematography. I think it got one Oscar nomination for cinematography. The fact that movie didn't get in more kind of surprises me. That's the year that An American in Paris wins Best Picture, a movie that I am currently watching for the very first time because I'm doing a year of Vincent Minnelli.
Okay.
I have 2/3 of his films I'd never seen before. I've never seen An American Paris before, so I'm watching that potentially tomorrow. This is the next one on my list for Minnelli. I haven't watched it yet.
People will give it a bad rap because it's seen as like a lesser Best Picture winner. I think it's pretty good for what it is. I wouldn't give it Best Picture, but I think it's fine.
So I think Hitchcock was deserving of a director nomination for Strangers on a Train for 51. William Wyler was nominated for Detective Story. That's a film I haven't seen, but
me either.
The other 4 I think we keep there. So William Wyler, I guess, would be the only one maybe. But yeah, I mean, it didn't get very much there. We get to 1954, and that's his 4th nomination. He gets nominated for Rear Window.
Yep.
That would have been, I think, of every movie he made in his career, the one that really would have pissed me off if he wasn't nominated for Rear Window.
I know.
If he had one nomination in his career for director, it would have been Rear Window. Right?
It's so clearly directed. Like his vision is so there. It takes place in one location. It is it's everything he does done well. It's not even my favorite Hitchcock, but I love it. It's up there for me.
I've always said that Rear Window for me is the movie. If someone has never seen a Hitchcock movie before, that's the one I show them.
I think that's
I feel like it encapsulates like terms of getting a sense of who he was as a filmmaker. That's the one I think, and it works for every group of students. Every time I've shown Rear Window, that movie works beautifully today. It still holds up. It's still suspenseful when when the killer looks directly at us.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Still gets a scream from college students and in the 2020s. So that's pretty amazing.
Great. That's one of those movies you wish you could go back in time and watch with an audience for the first time in the 50s,
like
reacting
opening
to
weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he gets in for that. He's up against Billy Wilder again. Wilder is nominated for Sabrina. I feel like I might make a video down the road here of like Hitchcock versus Wilder.
That's an interesting pairing. It's like the Hilary Swank and Annette Bening of best directors.
Because except for Rebecca, because I think Wilder started directing films in 42, so he hadn't directed anything yet. Except for the Rebecca year, the other 4 times that Hitchcock is nominated for best director at the Oscars, he's in the category with Wilder. So I'm just talking out loud here. I think I got a video in me coming up here about
sounds like it.
talking about Hitchcock and Wilder at the Academy Awards would be really fun. So the winner is Elia Kazan for On the Waterfront. Have you seen On the Waterfront?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So I can't get too mad about this win. So I would give it to Hitchcock for Rear Window, obviously, but it's probably the best film he lost to, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like, I'm okay with him losing in this case because On the Waterfront is so spectacular.
On the Waterfront's great. I don't know when I'm thinking about the directing job, I don't know. I feel like this could have been one of those years where we could have split it, where we could have given Hitchcock his one competitive Oscar for directing, and then On the Waterfront wins Best Picture.
On the Waterfront, it's so well written, but it's also really well acted. And I think a lot of times when we talk about directors, it's
not just the cinematography.
It's not just the picture construction or the pacing. They do craft the performances, and so if the performances are that good across the board, I do have to give a little credit to the director.
It's not just Kazan hiring the right actors, then him sitting back and saying, okay, go. I mean, there's a lot of work being done with the actors there. So
right, I mean, you got 5 that makes sense. Performance nominations. So
but I feel like of the 5 Oscar nominations, if I were to give him one Oscar, I think Rear Window would be the one. It's just so inventive and just totally it's all the way through.
The best direction he was ever nominated for. I'll give it that. I'll say that.
So, and Rear Window was not nominated for Best Picture, so that probably hurt him too.
Yeah, and the Best Picture lineup there is pretty good, but there was room for it. They could have no. I'm looking at it now; it's not very good. The Best Director lineup is better than the Best Picture number.
We're talking about films of the 50s here, Cody. I don't think they're all great.
Rough.
The Cane Mutiny. I've not seen that. The Country Girl. That's the one that Grace Kelly won her Oscar for.
Yes, that's the one she beat Judy Garland famously
and for. I couldn't remember that The Country Girl got into picture too. Have you seen that movie? I haven't seen The Country Girl.
I have. It's fine. It's not great. It's probably like second place by default with this lineup. I haven't seen Cane Mutiny, but the other 2 nominees are not great.
Aren't Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and Three Coins in the Fountain kind of similar in tone and feel? Aren't they kind of
Seven
both like
Brides,
musical, like
Three Coins of Fountain is
family
not
friendly?
a musical, but it
Okay.
is bad. It is really bad. And Seven Brides for the Seven Brothers is enjoyable, but extremely hard to watch because it's like insanely sexist. So like even watching it in the 50s, I might have been like,
so
I don't know.
I'm like, so you're telling me we couldn't have substituted Rear Window for either Seven Brides or Three Coins?
Right, exactly. And not even that. Sabrina gets a Best Director nomination. That's a great movie. So there was a lot of weirdness going on here.
That's weird. I wonder what happened there with Best Picture that year. It's interesting.
Know.
And then the last one to talk about, I feel like Psycho is controversial enough that it would have done well at the box office, was a big hit, but it just is pushed out of the Oscars. It's not an Oscar movie. And I love that it not only got in for Alfred Hitchcock for Best Director, but Janet Leigh was, I believe, the front runner to win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress because she won the Golden Globe.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of surprising that it got into Best Director. It feels like in the way that the current directors branch nominates, it feels almost like that kind of pick where they were like, we like this guy. We don't care if it's not going to get well loved across the world by the Academy. We're going to give it a nomination, something like Cold War getting into Best Director or Drive My Car. These artsier movies that the directors respect, even if on the whole the Academy respects it just a little bit less.
Well, I wonder, like, did the box office of Psycho help with that? Because I feel like if you were just looking at it in terms of the talent and what he accomplished, I feel like Vertigo should have gotten him a nomination too. But I think the movie underperformed in 58, and so it was kind of pushed
Vertigo
aside.
Was not well respected, I think, financially and critically for the most part. It got recessed, obviously, but
which is just so bizarre,
which is insane. But I think Vertigo is the kind of movie you have to watch. You don't necessarily have to watch it more than once, but I think while you're watching it, it's kind of like, what's going on here? And that is intriguing, obviously, but I think it can also be frustrating if you aren't watching it in the right frame of mind.
But I feel like today, if someone was like, if I didn't know much of anything and about the Oscars, and someone was like, what do you think Hitchcock got his last directing nomination for? Vertigo, North by Northwest, or Psycho? I'd probably say Vertigo makes more sense now because of how well respected that movie is today. It's more of an artistic film than Psycho is. But I love that. I really like the number 5. That's my and I like that my favorite director has 5 nominations, and that the last one is Psycho, his most famous film. I feel like that he could have missed on Psycho getting a director nomination. So that's really cool.
It's one of those things. Looking back, you're surprised it happened.
Yeah, it kind of. I mean, for a movie, I mean that was pretty shocking material at that time. So for him to get in. I don't think Psycho was ever going to get in for picture, right? It feels like we respect Hitchcock. He's done great work, and here's another big hit, and people love it. And so let's give him a director nom. And then he lost again to Billy Wilder for The Apartment, which also won Best Picture. The Apartment, a rare comedy, right, to win Best Picture and director.
Yeah, and a good one too.
Great, yeah, it's a great movie. So that's Hitchcock's run with Oscar, and then in '68 he got his Irving Thalberg Award. Said thank you, and that was it.
That's it. Never to return to the Oscars.
And Shirley Jones won Best Supporting Actress for Elmer Gantry over Janet Leigh. Have you seen Elmer Gantry?
I have, and she's pretty good in it. I don't get too sad about Janet Leigh not winning for Psycho because Shirley Jones is good in Elmer Gantry. It's a very Oscar-friendly role. She plays, I think, a prostitute, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's very like. She comes in and does her thing for a shorter amount of time than the 2 leads. It is very supporting, actress friendly. I think it's a pretty good win. I'm not too sad about it.
I mean, it's kind of one of those things. Does Janet Leigh do Oscar worthy work in Psycho? Maybe not. It's just such a famous performance, and she's an actress that I adore and everything I've seen her in, and I just love her so much. And so the idea that she could have gotten 1 Oscar for this movie is really cool. Like, she probably got close. She won the Golden Globe, so clearly there was a lot of love for her performance that year. So it's just kind of interesting.
I think it probably was very part of the biggest talking point of Psycho is Janet Leigh dying halfway through. And so if she's that big of a talking point that the character itself becomes so culturally relevant and part of the conversation, then it doesn't surprise me that they got the Oscar nomination because it was so just in the ether.
So at least she had the 1 Oscar nomination, something we're still trying to get her daughter one for.
Oh my God.
Jamie Lee Curtis is probably one of my favorite actors who has not gotten one Oscar nomination.
Yeah, she should have gotten in for True Lies.
It's just tricky. Like there's not, I would even True Lies, there's not one part that it's like, well, yes, clearly that should have gotten her an Oscar nomination. True Lies, she came closest, but she's kind of the female lead of that movie. So you can argue, is it supporting or is it lead?
Right.
And it's the kind of genre that it's really hard to get into the Oscars for that kind of movie. So
yeah. And I know there was confusion about which category she should be in. I think she's a lead in that, although I don't really care about category fraud or whatever. But the thing about Best Actress that year at the Oscars is it's not a great lineup. That's Jessica Lange's second Oscar.
Yeah,
so
that's a
her.
weird year for actress 94, because I feel like there was some room there for a surprise nominee from definitely. Like a Jamie Lee Curtis would have been really cool.
Winona was kind of a surprise for Little Women. That was kind of a surprise. But I mean,
Susan Sarandon for The Client. We could
I might vote for her. So she might be my winner.
It's fine. Well, maybe part of it is that she wins the next year for Dead Man Walking. Right. So I'm like, let's slip Jamie in here.
I know. I would have given it to her over Jessica Lange or Jodie Foster for Nell. Get out of here. No, thank you.
Foster for Nell. Is that Jodie Foster's last Oscar nomination? I want to say that was the last one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just read that she's going to be in True Detective.
I know, which is weird. I don't watch TV, so I guess I have to watch TV.
You don't watch TV?
Who has the time? I got movies to watch.
I know, there's so many movies to get to. But anyway, that was really fun to go through. I thought, having an Oscar enthusiast on today, Cody, to talk a little bit about Hitchcock's. I didn't mean for it to be 30 minutes like it was. It's so fascinating to look back, and that was just now talking to you. I was just now seeing like who he lost to, and so I was like kind of going around in my mind like, oh, okay, so Billy Wilder is like in every category. Yeah. This is so interesting. So I wish he could have won one competitive Oscar, but at the end of the day, he made genre films. It could have been possible for him to never be recognized, right? So, hey, he got 5 nominations. That's pretty cool.
I know, yeah.
So any final thoughts on Frenzy, a movie he got nominated at the Golden Globes for, but not the Oscars? Any final thoughts on our movie today, Frenzy? So I think it's by far his best work of the last 4 films. Is Frenzy better than Marnie?
I haven't seen Marnie, so I
feel like they're pretty close. I would say if I have to watch one of the two, I feel like Frenzy is the more entertaining watch. Marnie is longer. I want to say it's 2 hours plus, and it's pretty slow. It's more of a drama than it is a thriller. It's kind of a psychological drama with Tippi Hedren, and the one and only time Hitchcock worked with Sean Connery. It's kind of odd to watch Marnie because it's the same year of Goldfinger, and so Sean Connery looks like James Bond throughout Marnie, but he's playing this more seedy character, and it's kind of weird because it's hard to like differentiate like that era of James Bond with Sean Connery. So but that makes it interesting too.
Yeah, so like I said, this is probably my least favorite Hitchcock that I've seen.
How many have you seen? Like more than 10?
Oh yeah, let's see. I have my list right here. The thing is, I haven't seen the lesser than Hitchcocks. I haven't seen your Topazes, your Under Capricorns. So I've seen the big ones. I've seen 16 Hitchcocks altogether. So
how'd you know that list? How'd you know that so quickly?
Letterboxd.
Oh, letter. I need to get on Letterboxd.
I'm a really fast counter. All the Hitchcocks I've seen are his big ones, the ones he gets nominated for, the ones he's still remembered for. So compared to those, Frenzy's at the bottom of my list. It's just slightly below Suspicion, which I also don't love, but Suspicion, it's not bad.
Suspicion, I have admiration for. It's fun. I like Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine as a couple. Like I find it kind of interesting.
Fine. It's the ultimate like just talk to each other movie.
Just
like,
the end falls flat.
Yeah, the ending is flat, and all the conflicts would be completely resolved in a second if they just had a real conversation, which is frustrating to watch because like you're married, talk to each other.
I'm watching. So my other person I'm studying this year outside of Vincent Minnelli is I'm studying Cary Grant. So I just finished his films of 39, and so I'm going to be getting to his Hitchcock era at least a little bit here soon. So I'm going to be watching Suspicion in a few weeks. Nice. Which I haven't seen in a long time, but I remember I enjoy it.
It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, I mean, like I said, if I had seen all of Hitchcock's movies, this probably would be in the middle somewhere. Middle higher in the middle.
Yeah.
Even.
So
but
you've seen 16 out of 50.
50. So not even.
That surprises me, Cody, since pretty much every movie I named from my Oscar book you'd seen, but you've only seen 16 Hitchcocks. It's kind of surprising.
I mean, I'm gonna give myself a little credit here. 16 is a lot. It's a lot of movies, more than most people probably have seen.
I get the sense when I talk to you, I try to see everything. I get the sense when I talk to you that you have seen a lot more than I have.
Well, here's the thing about being a movie dork. Even if you haven't seen it, you can know a lot of things about a movie.
True.
So that's where I'm at. I don't have an opinion on it, but I might know about its place in its legacy and such. But once I do see more Hitchcocks, I'm really intrigued by that 52 Weeks of Hitchcock's book. I might check that out myself.
I think that's the way to do it, because you get to see the growth of his craftsmanship and like the way that he'll play in the same arena decade after decade, but do it in slightly different ways and grow as a filmmaker and be inventive. And
I do love watching filmography start to finish. I like seeing the full breadth of a career.
Oh, I love it.
And getting to pick up on patterns and trademarks and where it started. That kind of thing is really interesting for me. So if and when I do that, I'm sure Frenzy will be somewhere in the middle of top tier. But for now, because I've only seen like the big Hitchcocks, all the other 15 movies of his are, for the most part, recognizable. They're names I mean, I think to a casual person, they would know what it is.
Yeah, I think if you're going to look at the work of Alfred Hitchcock, I think beyond the 16 you've watched that are probably all the most famous titles, right? There's probably only maybe 5 more that I would maybe deem as essential Hitchcock or something. I'd have to look at your list.
Yes.
But he did make a lot of clunkers too. So
yeah, I put the ones I haven't seen that are big on my watch list to watch this podcast, but I ran out of time.
Do you have that in front of you? Like, what are like 5 that you haven't seen that you think would be? I wanted
to also watch To Catch a Thief, Trouble with Harry, Marnie, and Lady Vanishes. Those are the last big ones I hadn't seen. Also, I'm just realizing I haven't logged Spellbound yet, which again I watched mere seconds before hopping on this record. So I've seen 17 Hitchcocks.
When you log a film on Letterboxd, do you review each one, or do you just give it a rating?
I try to review most of the ones I watch, but some I just don't have anything to say, so I'll just log it.
I need to get back. I did that for a while, and then I just forgot.
If I have to write a full length review of it for Next Best Picture, then I usually won't write a Letterboxd review just because I'm already doing the work. But for the most part, I try to put some thoughts in there, even if it's a joke, like a stupid joke. Letterboxd review.
But here's my one big recommendation as we move into our final 2 segments here. The Lady Vanishes, Cody. That movie is my favorite of his 30s films. I think it's better than the 39 Steps, and it is just so entertaining, well acted, fun, crazy. It's so great. You'll love it. The Lady Vanishes.
Yeah, I definitely can check it out.
Trouble with Harry, To Catch a Thief, Marnie, they're fine.
They were more, I just wanted to watch them because I'd heard of them as opposed to like Under Capricorn or something like that.
Lady Vanishes, I believe, was the film that got him noticed from David O. Selznick because it won Hitchcock. I want to say it was like the New York Film Critics Best Director Prize in the States for 38 for all the releases around the world in 38. Hitchcock won Best Director at the New York Film Critics for a British film. So that got him a lot of recognition. I think 39 Steps was the first big push and from 35, and then Lady Vanishes from 38. That was like the movie that sealed the deal. Hitchcock is coming to America.
That makes sense.
All right, so our final 2 segments. First one, Divine Double Feature. What's a modern film you would pair with Frenzy?
Okay, I had a few options here, so I'll go through them quickly.
Okay.
First one that jumped to me, front of mind, it's pretty obvious. It's an amazing movie, is David Fincher's Zodiac. It's also about killer, it's a very procedural, very similar, like nasty worldview. It's very pessimistic. It is like supremely crafted. It's my favorite movie of 2007, but that's obvious. My other 2 picks are a little bit less obvious. One of them is this movie from 2007 called let me get the full title. It's kind of a weird one. One second. It's called Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
Oh, I've heard of that. I've never seen it.
I saw it a long time ago and I enjoyed it, but it might not be as good as I remember. But what I remember enjoying about it was it is a it's a mockumentary horror comedy where this camera crew is for some reason following this wannabe like slasher serial killer around, and it's very funny. It's like kind of a spoof of slashers, but it also has slasher elements in it.
Okay.
And it's a really slightly off-kilter, humorous tone that's still chilling and effective, which it reminds me of the tone of Frenzy, which is, like we said, it has a weird off-kilter energy to it. It is kind of humorous in parts, but it also has these horrifying murders. So I thought that'd be an interesting little parallel.
Okay.
And then my last one is Jane Campion's In the Cut, which came out in 2003.
Okay.
Which is a movie that upon release was like detested, but it has
I've never seen In the Cut. I've wanted to.
Watched it kind of recently. I went through all of Jane Campion's movies earlier this year.
Okay.
I loved it. I loved it.
It's Meg Ryan and Mark Ruffalo, right?
Mark Ruffalo.
I somehow missed that one. It came out like right when I want to say moving to college, and I just missed it. And I've been meaning to watch it.
It's my favorite of her movies that isn't The Piano or Power of the Dog.
Okay.
But it's a really gruesome movie. It's also about a serial killer targeting women.
Oh, interesting.
Extremely grim tone, which is the opposite of Frenzy. So if you're looking for something to be a little bit of a counterpoint to Frenzy, it's hypersexual in the same way that Frenzy is to a degree. It has that psychosexuality. It's really great. It's really grim. It's really depressing. The performances are great.
So why did it not? I feel like that movie didn't do well critically.
No,
or
it didn't.
Anything.
It got bad reviews. I think because it's so cynical, and it was
okay.
It was Meg Ryan doing something extremely out of what audiences liked to see her doing. You know, it's like she's really sexual. It's really grim and nasty, and it's just not a pleasant movie at all. I think audiences at the time, this is like, post 9/11. It's not really what people were going to the theaters for.
Right.
But I loved it.
That's interesting. Yeah. Boy, I need to do a video on Meg Ryan because I love her career and her films. And I just feel so bad about what happened to her because I feel like after In the Cut, and I think she did that boxing movie Against the Ropes.
Against the Ropes.
I feel like after that, she just kind of faded away. She did a few things here and there.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the way that Hollywood treats women in their she's probably in her 40s around then. So, but
yeah,
In the Cut
is
it's really unpleasant, but in a very, I don't want to say entertaining, but very intriguing way. I really had a good time with it. I think it's one of those.
You've sold me. That's one of those I just forgot about.
Cinema score, which is always interesting.
Cinema score. Yeah, no, you've sold me. That's one I just I forget about that movie. Like I'm meaning to watch it, and so you've sold me because like I need to do because Jane Campion. How many movies does she have? Does she have more than
Not
7?
A lot.
She doesn't have very many, right? I feel like I've seen them all. Power of the Dog and The Piano. I still have not seen the one with Nicole Kidman, Portrait of a Lady. I still need to see that.
That was pretty good.
And so I mean, yeah, I think I need to do like and I don't need a whole year. Maybe I'll do like a 2-month Jane Campion.
Yeah,
just watch
she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
what did she?
6,
how
7,
many films did she make before The Piano?
9?
Does she have 1 or 2 before The Piano?
Yeah, she had 3 or 4 before The Piano.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So she was
Australian
well established. Huh?
From Australia, right?
New Zealand.
Oh, I'm sorry, New Zealand.
Yeah. So she was well established in New Zealand cinema, and she had been to Cannes a few times. So she was definitely up and coming, and The Piano was just incredible. So
The Piano put her on the map. And so yeah, her films are so interesting. So I need to look at the ones I haven't seen. You've definitely sold me on In the Cut, and that, what was the Leslie Verdon, what's that one called? Or the second one you said, Beyond the Mask?
Oh yes. I was like, what? Jane Campion,
not Jane Campion.
Yes. Behind the Mask.
Behind the Mask.
Leslie Vernon. Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
I haven't seen
I think it played in limited release when I was living in LA in 2007, and it looked really interesting. And I just haven't gotten around. I think it was on Shudder at some point.
I haven't seen it in like 15 years. So if it's actually bad, I apologize if I watched it when I was like 14 when it came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe.
I'm so excited. I'm writing those down. So In the Cut, I just forgot about. I need to see that. And then Behind the Mask. Okay. On my list. Awesome. So I went with not a movie that's necessarily like directly related to Frenzy. I just was like, what's like a Hitchcockian film of the last 15 years that I really admired, that was really cool, that gave me a lot of Hitchcock vibes? And the one that I thought of that I've only seen it the once, and I remember being really impressed by it, was Buried from 2010 with Ryan Reynolds. Like stuck under the ground, a claustrophobic thriller. He's in just like a coffin, right? Or he's in like he's in like a space where
buried.
He can't like barely even move his limbs, right? He's the lead actor, and it's just him. Like basically the whole movie, he's on the phone. We hear other voices, but it's just one of those where you think there's no way you can have this be an interesting movie for 90 minutes, and the director Rodrigo Cortez, he pulled it off, and it's really riveting. And I remember renting it thinking, oh, this might be kind of rough, I don't know if I'll like this, and I remember just being really taken with it. And I don't think a lot of people think of Ryan Reynolds as a great actor, but I thought he did a really good job in that movie, and I was really impressed that he would take a movie like that. Like when his star was on the rise is right after The Proposal, right before Green Lantern. Was that 2011? So right in between those those big studio movies that he would take on a claustrophobic thriller like Buried that probably didn't cost a whole lot of money. I was really taken with it. I thought it was well done, and it kept any movie that's claustrophobic, one actor for 90 minutes. Phone Booth was another one I thought of, although that one has a little bit more of an ensemble from 2003 by Joel Schumacher. Yeah. That one's fun too. That also has a feeling of Hitchcock too. But I feel like it kind of came and went. Not everyone's seen it. I would recommend you check out Buried. I think that's a really good thriller that not everyone's seen.
I saw that years ago, so I can't quite remember details about it, but I remember liking it, and it definitely is probably Ryan Reynolds' best performance.
It's really his best performance. Yeah, that's probably the best dramatic performance of Ryan Reynolds. Nothing else comes to mind.
Sorry, buddy.
maybe one day. Hey, I'm always, an actor like that who does a lot of more popular kind of films. I love it. Meg Ryan for In the Cut. I love it when an actor who's kind of known for one thing, and even if it doesn't do well, like just to see them try something different, to see, John Candy show up for one scene in Oliver Stone's JFK for a dramatic performance is so exciting for me. When an actor that we think of as one way, even if they only get an opportunity here and there, I always love that. So,
yeah, I mean, like he started his career doing less things than what he does now, which is mostly really self-aware kind of meta comedies.
Yeah,
Free Guy and Deadpool.
Free Guy.
Movies I don't like, but he started with kind of weird things like the first Wolverine movie where he plays Deadpool, but his mouth is covered the whole time. And he was in that Amityville Horror remake, which I never saw, which I heard is really bad.
Yeah, we don't talk about
that. He had an interesting start to his career that I think he has kind of figured out his own brand. And again, I don't personally love that brand, but if it works for him,
my favorite film with him is The Proposal, because I'm a big Sandra Bullock fan, and that movie I could watch. That's a movie I like. If it's on TV, I'll just watch the rest of it. I just find it very entertaining. But I don't think we think of him as a great dramatic actor, but check out Buried. I think he's really strong in that, and it's a good movie.
Yeah.
All right, that takes us to our final segment, Beyond the Flick. Alfred Hitchcock. You can take 3 Hitchcock movies to a desert island, Cody. You've seen 16 of them. What are the 3 you take with you?
So mine are not super shocking. My number 1 is Vertigo.
Okay.
It's just the best. There's just no contesting it. It's one of the best films ever made. It's my favorite Hitchcock movie. I feel kind of like disappointing to be saying that, but it just is. It's just undeniable.
So why is Vertigo your favorite? What is it about? I think
it is beautiful. I saw it on
gorgeous
a few years ago on a huge screen, and it was just one of the best theatrical experiences I've ever had. The score is incredible. It's one of my favorite Jimmy Stewart performances. I think the themes of it are so strong and still relevant in a way that I think that's probably part of the reason why audiences at the time didn't appreciate it, because I think it's themes of the control that men have over women. They're very pressing socially in a way that I don't know if Eisenhower era America was ready for. But I think it's just spectacularly constructed. I think it is kind of weirdly moving in a way. I just love it so much. My second one is Rear Window, which I have a lot of similar feelings about Vertigo. It's well constructed. It's a good Jimmy Stewart performance. It looks great. Grace Kelly is gorgeous and very talented in it. But it's very suspenseful. Whereas Vertigo is suspenseful. This is much more compact and crammed into this one space. And it's such a good setup, where he has this broken leg and he has this He's an amazing photographer, so he knows how to like look at things well. That's just so smart, so well constructed.
It's a story that works really well for 1954. Other filmmakers have tried to kind of remake it and do different things down the road. I feel like the Rear Window story of being voyeuristic and seeing a murder across the way, can't really do that movie now. It's like it's very much of its time.
It's had a lot of copycats, and I think there's to degrees of success, but nothing has ever done as well. Nothing's ever had as much success in its end product as Rear Window. And then my last one is my favorite movie from when I was 7 years old, Strangers on a Train.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is one of the better early Hitchcock movies. My favorite of his black and white era. And I think it's just so effective. It's chilling. It's beautifully constructed. The cinematography is incredible. And that lead performance is really just haunting and, kind of campy in a way. I really like it.
And you can tell, like, after 4 flops, like, you could tell that, okay, finally Hitchcock is back where he's supposed to be. And
he's hit his stride.
Just from the opening sequence of just seeing the men getting on the train, and it's all done from a low angle of seeing just their feet all the way until the one foot crosses the other. And then we see the actors for the first time. Just from the inspiration there of how to start the movie, you're in the hands of a great director, and it's just one of his best. So that's a good transition, because my third favorite of his films is Strangers on a Train. That movie is just on another level of brilliant. I love the actors in it, and it's got like a sense of mystery to it and menace, and so many memorable sequences. And it's a great book too. I read the book for my MFA annotation list. I had to pick 30 thrillers and horror novels, and I picked the original Strangers. I hadn't read it before, and it was Patricia Highsmith's, I believe, her first published novel. It was before she wrote Talented Mr. Ripley, and it reads great. Like for I want to say it was 49 or 50 it was published.
Okay.
It was published like right before the movie came out. And so that must have been really exciting for her. You get your first novel published, and then Hitchcock makes it into this great movie. It would have been, that would have been quite something for Patricia Highsmith is in the theater like, all right. I think she liked it. I think she really enjoyed the movie. So yeah, Strangers is essential viewing. I feel like of the most famous Hitchcock movies, Strangers is not at the top of that list of the one that everyone knows, right?
Yeah.
I feel like if you were to ask a casual movie fan, name me some Hitchcock movies, I think Strangers you wouldn't hear for most people. Right?
No, I think it's well regarded amongst film buffs in the same way that like Shadow of a Doubt and Notorious are. But I agree. If you ask somebody on the street name Hitchcock movie, they would all say Psycho. Some people would say Vertigo, maybe. But yeah. So my second favorite is Rear Window. That, to me, as I said before, that's the one. If someone has never seen a Hitchcock movie, that's the one I would show. Plays great today. Everything that you said and more. It's so tight. It's a little slow for the first 30 minutes. Now you have to have a little bit of like, you have to go with it. It's not like he sees a murder in minute 6 and then he's like trying to get on the phone with the authorities. Like, we spend time with him and his relationship with Grace Kelly and getting to know them a little bit. But the progression of the suspense is so well modulated, so well done. Like, it just gets more and more and more. And by the time Grace Kelly is crossing over there to break in, so good.
Like, you can't. It's just it's so compelling,
still effective.
And you feel so later. And Hitchcock makes you feel so trapped, like Jimmy Stewart's character, because it's like he can't run out of that room. Like, he is stuck there, and he knows that the killer is coming over, and there's nothing he can do about it. And it's just so great. I love that movie. But yeah, I'm no shockers here. I really, I have struggled my whole life, Cody, with Vertigo. I admire the hell out of it. It's not in my top 5. It's in my top 10. It's not in my top 5. It's not, I think part of it is, if I'm going to go revisit his best films, it's not the one that I go revisit.
You're not the first person I've heard say that.
I think I've never seen Vertigo on a big screen. I think it would really be magical on a big screen.
I
to
recommend
see that
it.
projected would be really cool. I've seen like every other famous film of his on a big screen at some point. Like I took like film history classes in college. They never showed Vertigo. Like kind of weird. But yeah, I mean, it's dreamy, and it's kind of sinister, and in the way that where the story progresses in the second half, and great performances from Kim Novak and Jimmy Stewart. It's just not, I love it. It's just not quite at the level of some of the other ones that I love. Like I think I would put The Bird slightly above Vertigo if I had to go back and if I had to go back and watch one this afternoon. If I just wanted to just make some lunch and put on one of the two, I think I would put on The Birds. Like I just enjoy that movie a little bit more, just as a piece of entertainment. I'm not saying that The Birds is a better movie than Vertigo. I'm just saying for my personal taste, my personal choice. I think The Birds is something that I might love just a little more, but we're getting into the weeds here because I mean they're all amazing. Like I have like seven or eight, including The Lady Vanishes, including Shadow of a Doubt, that I just think are brilliant through and through. So it's just like, it's like these little modulations here. Like, but yeah, my number one is Psycho. Has always been Psycho. It's the first one I saw. And I would say the second half of Psycho is not as good as the first half, but I still adore that movie. And it's been in my top 10 of all time since I was in middle school, high school. It's never dropped out of my top 10. It's currently at number 9. It used to be at number 8.
See, everything you said about not really quite getting into Vertigo, that's how I feel.
Is that how you feel about Psycho?
Yeah, which I really admire. I so wish I could have seen it, if not literally in the 60s when nobody knew what was happening. I wish I could have gone in not knowing the twist, because I had somebody had already told me what happens in that movie by the time I saw it, because it's just such a famous twist, not just the murder in the shower, but also the reveal of who the killer is, who the mom is. So I wish I had not known that going in. I think it might have been more impactful.
You put on it for the first time, not you put on it for the first time knowing the twist. That probably hurt your first watch of it.
But that's been true of other movies. I've watched them knowing the twist. Like when I saw The Sixth Sense for the first time, I already knew what happens and I still loved it. So I think it's just something that never quite does for me what I want to do. It's still great, obviously. It still would be most directors' best movie, period. But it just never quite. I wouldn't put it in my top 5 Hitchcocks.
Yeah, it's beyond. Maybe part of it is just my experience with it when I saw it and how it affected me, and that was the first one I saw of his. That was my introduction to him. But there's something about Psycho that for me, it's like more than a film to me. There's something that I love revisiting about it. There's a feeling to that movie and to the performances, and every moment in that movie, even after Janet Leigh's character Marion is killed, and some of the later scenes with the sister and the boyfriend are a little bit more pedestrian. I feel like he still packs a punch with the killing of that detective Arbogast and the reveal of the corpse at the end, and it's in that long walk that Marion's sister takes up to the house. And it's just I love that. I love the production design of that house and that motel and just the feeling of that place. I think Norman Bates is one of the great movie villains of all time, and huge Janet Leigh fan and what she does with that role in the first 40 minutes. And just that, as you said, that twist probably isn't as effective if you know about it beforehand. But I remember even as an 11-year-old, I'm like, wait, she died? She's the star.
I know. I wish I could have had that.
And it's something that to this day, most filmmakers, you don't see that very much. I mean, they kind of replicated it in Scream by having a big star, Drew Barrymore, killed off in the first 13 minutes. I think that
definitely.
But like, I feel like I would like to see that more today. Like movies where you think it's one thing for 40 minutes and then it becomes something else, whether it's that's the killing of the main character, or if I feel like we don't see that very much today. And it's something that Hitchcock was so brave in doing in 1960. And I think it just still holds up. It's just such a great story. And I love that movie. So
yeah. I really like it a lot. It just never quite jumps into like, oh my God, territory.
Even the long explanation by that guy at the end doesn't bother me as much as it does everyone else. I kind of like that.
I don't mind that either. I think it's very much a relic of its time. I think it's very insightful into what psychoanalysis on a casual level looked like.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
But one film that's not on my top 10 is the 1998 Psycho.
I've never seen it. I'm very intrigued by it. I think it sounds like a fascinating experiment.
Is it the one and only? Is it the one and only major film remake ever that's shot for shot, line for line, basically exactly the same?
I feel like there's been others, but it's definitely the most notable.
It's the most famous
movie regarded
to get that kind of remake. Like to not change. I mean, obviously there are some changes. It's in color. There's nudity. I mean, well, is there nudity in the shower? Like we get more we get more grisly kind of violence in the shower scene than we get. So it's like, okay, we're updating it to the 90s and we can show more now. But in terms of like its shots and the dialogue, it's pretty much the same movie, which is very strange. And it's like, why was this made?
I find that very interesting, even if it's a failure.
So I don't know. At some point, I always like down there. I was like, okay, some point, Brian, we got to have a really an interesting night where we just watch them back to back and really compare the two. But then I'm like, do I want to do that? Not really.
Right. Well, do you want to finish with the worst movie, or do you want to watch it in order? That's tricky.
Start with Gus Van Sant's version.
Yeah.
It's just so fascinating to me that Gus Van Sant, he makes Good Will Hunting, gets nominated for an Academy Award for Best Director, and he pretty much could have made anything he wanted after that, and he chooses to remake Psycho. It's just such a weird choice.
Yeah. it's very you have the world, what do you want to do, and it's what he wanted to do, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, so that does not come close to my favorite Hitchcock film, which is Psycho. But as I mentioned, I would say of all the films of his that you haven't seen, definitely check out The Lady Vanishes from 38. That movie is fantastic. That would be right on the level with me with The Birds and Vertigo, like around the number 4 or 5 slot. It's my favorite of his films from the 30s. All right, Cody. I've had you almost 3 hours. I apologize.
I know, is this the longest we've gone?
I should have warned you before, because I'm such a huge Hitchcock fan, that we were going to be diving into Frenzy and his work a little bit more deeper than I usually do. Some of my episodes run as short as an hour, and it's like, okay, well, there's not much to talk about with this one. So,
well, but how are we doing? You start me with the Oscars, forget about it. So,
yeah, exactly. But it's always such a treat to have you on and talk film with you. It's been so much fun. As we wrap up here, Cody, tell our listeners where they can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram at CodyMonster91. I write and podcast for Next Best Picture, so I'm on there quite a bit. And also I have my own podcast that I co-host with my friend called Halloweeners, a horror movie podcast where we go through one horror movie an episode. It is very, the energy is very light, very silly, very non-professional. So
have you done a Hitchcock? Yeah,
we did Psycho.
Have you done Hitchcock? Oh, you did Psycho. Okay.
One of our earlier episodes. Yeah.
Did your co-host like Psycho more than you?
Yeah, and I like it. I still like it. It just, don't love it. But
just don't love it. It's hard. I mean, very few directors have this many great films. It's kind of hard to be like, okay, exactly, well, this one is just okay. This one, it's like,
any other director, then it'd be their number one without even trying.
If some unknown director had made Psycho, the movie that came out from Hitchcock, I mean, we would be like, revering this man and be like, wow, what an amazing film. And the fact that Hitchcock made as many great films as he did in a 50-year career, it's pretty remarkable. So I guess if I'm still doing this in 2026, we'll talk about Family Plot, but it's not one of his best efforts. So it's not, don't hold your breath, ladies and gentlemen. But thanks so much for being here, Cody. This was so much fun, and hope to have you back soon to talk about another classic film on Film at 50. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And check out my new YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, talking about all things Oscars. Maybe I'll even do a video about Hitchcock's Oscar run. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.